Big Talk podcast for the first time ever. The pilot episode where me, Alex Vayner,
And Yoeli Doppelt.
are going to do. We pledge to have no small talk whatsoever.
That's why it's called Big Talk.
Okay.
The Big Talk podcast. Did I tell you the story that happened at the mechanics, like when I was getting inspection recently? So we're standing there, both of our cars are on lifts, and this elderly gentleman starts talking to me about the weather. And he's talking about it's like whatever, the rain and it's cold and I was there, making small talk. And then when he finally released me after like a minute, I realized my entire face was like seized up. Like I turned the other way, and it's that same face you make, when you make that phone call, you'd be like, Shlomi, can I borrow $50,000? And you're like, like literally I was in that much pain. I had to like massage my jaw from 1 minute of small talk with a stranger. And as you know, small talk is my enemy because I believe all human communication should be meaningful, ideas, emotions, how you feeling, how you doing, but like not just how's the weather? Oh, that's so nice. Oh, great.
Excellent. So this is what we're gonna try to accomplish here. We're gonna try to deliver valuable information, something that's gonna be not just inspiring, because as we know, inspiration a lot of times in life just doesn't last, and we're gonna try to deliver something that people could take home and maybe have practical understanding from and be able to use in their lives and to make their lives better.
Yeah, we promise really, really good guests. Good guests that are well knowledgeable in the field that we're bringing them in for.
In addition to the good hosts.
Yeah, you're stuck with us. But yeah, we already know like there's so many topics we want to cover. Obviously, we're going to start here with Bitcoin because this is what actually caused us to take this leap after 4 years of discussing the Big Talk podcast. We even had the name Big Talk 4 years ago. I started making the daily videos about Bitcoin, and we said, okay, let's just make our first episode. Order the mics on Amazon. If you're wondering why we're in this room, it's the only soundproof room in my house, in my basement. And Baruch Hashem, I play here every day, and that's for another episode when we talk about dopamine.
We're gonna have a lot of
Obviously,
very interesting topics.
Why I undertook to play music daily, and I'm not allowed. My producer does not let me talk about the musical project that will be released until it is closer to release. So we're going to stick to non-musical ideas in this music environment.
There was another time also in our relationship history that we witnessed in 2020. There was a world consequential event known as COVID that Yoeli had amazingly been able to predict pretty much every step between 15 days to flatten the curve were not supposed to be 15 days. And all the other completely ineffective ways in which they were trying to battle COVID or battle the whole situation. Definitely was a very difficult time in history, but he was ahead, and I heard every single day from Yoeli.
We were chavrusis then. We had started the Daf Yomi. We were like in the middle of brachos.
Learning every day, and we didn't have any mediums to communicate to the world. And right now, I feel like we're building something. Hopefully, there will be no other COVID-like event.
Amen.
But hopefully, we'll have mediums to communicate with the world. So, Yoeli, why is it that we're talking about Bitcoin today?
Before we talk about Bitcoin, for some of the listeners who don't know what I went through in 2020.
Okay, please tell us.
Basically, when COVID hit us, this we're not talking about somebody who's like in April, May, and June and July. I'm talking about beginning of March. As soon as Purim happened and I realized we all had COVID, I realized that 6 out of 10 people lost their sense of smell. I started writing letters to every official, every news outlet, saying you don't need to lock down, you don't need to test. There was no testing. The testing only came a few weeks later.
Right.
You can just have everybody log into a website as if a government website's going to be, functional and efficient, and tell them that you lost your sense of smell. How many people in your family, so they can start realizing that COVID has already swept through your neighborhood. So, for example, Borough Park and Lakewood and Williamsburg and Crown Heights could have stayed open from the very beginning, and as the weeks that followed, I was like, what? You're locking everyone down, but you force them and funnel them into the grocery stores where they can all give each other COVID? So I really lost my mind, and I spent those few months in this tunnel vision thinking I can make a difference, and nobody replied to me. Months later, I started getting automated replies from news outlets and all government officials, the office of the mayor, whatever it is. So, but at least everything I said turned out to be true, meaning everything I was concerned about. But I don't think if it would have made a difference if I had this platform. but at least for the first time, I'll have an audience.
I feel like just like at anything in life, a lot of times you want to have a medium just to know that you did what you could,
Right.
right?
That's exactly what it was.
And we can't really predict the results in life of how our efforts will manifest.
Do you remember? Wait. Do you remember we were learning that day, and I said tomorrow I'm going to go to like a bridge and pretend to jump off just to
Just
get
to get people's attention.
just to get the media's attention
Yes,
and
this-
scream. Lockdowns won't help. You know. Anyway, that's it. Yeah, I went crazy, but you can understand. I had this clarity. The first thing I was talking about, I was like, what about the thousands of children that will die in the third world countries? What about tuberculosis in India, where they can't get to a doctor to just get basic antibiotics? And sure enough, the numbers, if you look up the Indians who died from tuberculosis during that first year in
there was a
2020,
big spike.
spike, we're talking about a 10x in mortality.
Right. Well, the craziest part also is, and this is, we didn't even touch on that, but the fact that myself, you, and literally all of our immediate friends, probably a good 80% of them already had COVID at that point.
Right.
Like, we just recovered, and our
And we made $1 million in my house, and the word on the street was that I'm killing people, and I didn't have the platform to defend myself. That our minion are all people who have immediately just recovered from COVID, and everyone kept saying, "Yeah, but you don't know that you can't get it again." And I said, even Fauci said that you can't get it again. At that point, this was in the middle
like
of
any other virus.
right. If it behaves like 99% of other viruses,
No, he said literally every other, because
yeah.
they
One
all,
time he said 99%. I know he said. Yeah, but
then
then
it went to
eventually-
98,
and then eventually he changed his tune at some point, and he was like, "Well, robust immunity," but in the beginning. But anyway, now back to Bitcoin. So, in a small overview, I had my Bitcoin aha moment in February of 2022, after Bitcoin already had just peaked. It was still in the 50s, like 50,000 and change. Now, I had been buying Bitcoin for many, many years at very cheap and selling it at very cheap, but being all excited that I tripled my money from $180 to $540.
that was, one second, you
This was
talk to me about
this
this.
was back in
Yeah, what year was it?
I would say 2015.
Mhm.
So, and I remember going to the person it's a family member actually who introduced me to it, and I said, "But what about Ethereum and Litecoin and other coins that are being done?" And he answered me, "Well, we don't know which one will be the winner." So I was dividing my attention, and I remember the clarity that I had. This is a scam, but I might as well make some money off of it. And the more people tried talking to me about, like, no, it has real value. Eventually, I met some people that said there's other, poor countries, third world countries, and governments, but like I was like, but what is it? Can you touch it? Can I make a bracelet out of it? And that was the argument, the only argument I knew.
So you would say that your understanding basically kind of evolved. Back then, you were already kind of involved with it. You didn't understand it.
Did not understand it at all.
It was just a fad, that
I'd
some
say
new thing that's going
I traded thousands of dollars of Bitcoin, buying and selling, which in today's marketplace would probably be, I don't know, $100 million worth, just happily in many years, I guess I'd say from 2015 to 2021.
Okay.
My final thing was I dumped everything in the summer of 2021. I was holding some money of friends of mine as well. Some lived in Israel, and we had this big pool, and we had so much Ethereum and Bitcoin. Of course, in those days, it had to be a whole coin, right? Because you thought a Bitcoin is like a coin.
Some people still don't buy it because of that.
Just for those who are wondering, Bitcoin is not at $66,000 now. It is at 6.6 tenths of a penny per Satoshi. It's not like there's no complete unit that has any value. 1.1 Bitcoin or 0.99.
It's all arbitrary.
It's just right. It's all arbitrary.
Okay.
It's just that the reason why they're called one Bitcoin, because for the first certain amount of years when they're mined as a whole coin. Eventually, and we're going to get to the mining, and we're going to describe to you what Bitcoin is from the ground up. Most of the Bitcoins that will be mined from the year 2040 till 2140, the last 100 years, are fractions of Bitcoins because there's not enough left.
Right. So there's
We'll
a
get
lot
to
of
that.
components here that I want our listeners to learn about, because right now that's the fact that we haven't discussed really, but this is an amazing opportunity right now. And this is why we're starting our whole series now with Bitcoin, is that
And I want to just reiterate, it's not an opportunity now to buy Bitcoin. It's not first of all, it's not an investing opportunity. We'll discuss that because Bitcoin is a store of value and money. It's not an investment. It's money. Money is an investment's the opposite of money, where I take money that could be used for anything and I invest it in a company. I invested in my business. I invested in gold. Okay, gold might be as money as well, but anything a commodity like oil, sugar, and corn, that can be considered an investment. Whereas if I hold it in money, that's liquid, that's non-investment. So the idea of Bitcoin is telling you do not invest, rather hold your money in the most liquid good, which would be cash, which I would argue is Bitcoin. But even there, the point of this discussion is not that you should be buying Bitcoin, but rather start discussing it and understanding it. And I hope this first jumpstart of an hour will give you, a very, very big head start in getting the wealth of information required just to understand the security of Bitcoin, how it works, how it's created, what it is. What it's not is is going to be very important when
Okay.
we discuss the whole concept of crypto, because I believe crypto is something that everyone should stay away from at all costs, even if you could turn a quick profit. I hope you know that as well.
And by the way, some people do, but that's a
They're
completely different thing.
That's
Just so that's
gambling.
important. Correct.
That's speculation.
Yeah, you could do
Right.
that with a lot of other things as
We're
well.
gonna we're gonna make the case, and the only reason why I tell my friends to buy a small amount of Bitcoin, I remember when I told this to you in April of 2022, where I said, Alex, you must just trust me for now. You must. Was if you're invested $100, it can hold your attention,
Right.
like,
Right.
and it did. And I remember then you were like, but I can't. I need to buy a whole Bitcoin. I was like, I don't know. And then it dropped. I remember it dropped to like $20,000, and you bought a whole Bitcoin, right? That was your first purchase. Was an entire Bitcoin, if I remember correctly.
Something like that.
And did you buy any more since then? Or?
Well, you just mentioned that your advice was not to buy Bitcoin, so we're gonna abstain from that. But let's dive in. I think I have a few questions here that I'm
Yeah.
gonna throw at you, and I think those are the things that we'll start with the very basics, right? Historically, perhaps, or we take the fact that money is something that's a part of our life every day for granted because we use money, we try to save money, we invest money. There's different things we do with money, but what is money? What is it that historically money? What problem does it solve, and what forms of money are there? And it's going to help us understand Bitcoin as well. I hope.
100%. There is no way. Recently I was talking to somebody, and it was a friend of mine, and I was saying, I'll give you like 15 minutes just to give you a start. And I started talking about money. He's like, no. I know what money is. I need you to talk about Bitcoin. I'm like, I don't think you know what money is. And there is no way to talk about Bitcoin without talking about money. So, first of all, money is not, because we grew up knowing money and government are connected. It can't be farther from the truth. Governments have always been founded as nation states after the fact around money. If there was money in a healthy society, economic activity, then the government was able to function. But governments actually in history never created, according to my research, never created a fiat currency suddenly because they knew it wouldn't work. Human beings understand what money is. They understand that they want to be able to store their economic activity in something.
So what do you mean not suddenly? Like,
So the only, for example, the history of how the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913, and the dollar was completely backed by gold. It was completely interchangeable with the reserve currency of the world at that point, which was the Great British Pound, which was 4.5 pounds to 4.5 British pounds. It's confusing, to a pound of gold, 16 ounces of gold, and that was completely interchangeable with the dollar being a 20th of an ounce of gold. So the entire world economy of the quote unquote civilized world, that at that point was connected with telegraph already in the second half of the 19th century, was completely on the gold standard. And that means that a person trusted that when he worked hard and said, I will now store my value, my time. I just worked overtime for a few weeks doing this very big project. The king hired me to oversee all the tailors, other tailors, making the dresses and suits for the royal wedding banquet. And I got a big bonus of, let's say, a certain amount of, whether it was rubles or marks or gold coins. And now I'm able to take all that extra time and economic activity and expertise and put it into the future by holding on to this gold. Now, were the gold to have lost value because people were printing gold somehow, he would have not been able to do that.
you see that also today, even in a lot of different cultures. In India or other, there's like generational wealth.
Right. But wait, we're gonna get to that in a moment because I want to touch that gold is not money is not jewelry. We'll get there in a moment. But if he would have to want to hold on to that value and say, I want to take my economic time and energy and expertise and put it into the future, that it will be there for me in 10 years from now or for my children. If he was worried that the gold would not hold that value, he would then be forced to take a risk and invest it. And that's called an investment. He would have to then buy a farm or start a business. Now, many people did investments back then. People bought lumber yards. People did bought the rights of tax collecting and mail routes and shipping routes. The economic activity. There were barbers. There were flower shops. There were butchers. And a person had to make an investment with his gold into expanding his butcher shop, so to speak. That's an investment.
Okay.
But anything you kept in liquid good, in money, that's not an investment. That was the ethical way to hold on to a portion of your net worth and your value and your time and energy, and keep it in liquid money. So what money really is a medium of exchange. That's its primary technological use.
It basically solves the problem that the barter doesn't.
No, right.
Like
So
when I want to trade things and with you, and I'm not interested in your service, but I want to give you value.
you don't need garbage picked up.
Well, sometimes.
I
but
still
not,
have a cholent store in Eretz Yisrael. You sure? I can ship you a lot of cholent.
Right. So there's only that much cholent I could eat.
Okay. So what you're talking about is the coincidence of wants, that in a very small group of let's say you take a very small group of people in a tribe, and they're out in the mountains. So they have a very simple bartering system. One night we all take turns watching, taking night watch, keeping the fire burning. For whatever reason, we would need that fire burning.
Sometimes, by the way,
because they didn't know how to make fire. Once they got the fire on, they had to keep it on, right?
By the way, it's just as you were speaking about this, sometimes it could be also stored in time of like serving. Like I'll look out now for the next 3 hours, and you'll do it for the next 3 hours.
Yeah, so it is possible. Meaning, a small group of people are able to not use money,
right,
and they can just barter systems. They can cooperate. I know that in my household, different ones of my children like having different chores, and they discuss it with each other. Okay, today you'll clear the table, and tomorrow I know you're supposed to pick up the dry cleaning. I'll do it for you, and that's a bartering system. And we don't have to then create this unit called the Doppelt. The Doppelt coin,
the Doppelt dollar,
the Doppelt dollar or the Doppelt coin, and then exchange it, because but the minute if we had this very complex bartering systems of 20 households or of 100 households, it would become very complicated to use to keep track of who owes who what, which chores, and then we'd have to take a ledger. And once you make a ledger, now that's money, because for those who don't know, that's what the dollar is. The dollar is a ledger system. People think that the dollar is a printed form that you can go to the ATM and take out a dollar. It's true, you can, but the number of dollars in circulation that are printed in physical form versus the amount in circulation in our bank accounts is somewhere between 2 and 4%.
right?
That means somewhere between 96 and 98% of dollars are not printed.
They're just on the screen.
They're digital.
Yeah.
Exactly like Bitcoin is. It's a regular digital currency. And when I send you a Zelle, the ledger system, which was actually invented by a Jewish person known as Rothschild, who invented the banking system. They say, what do you mean he invented banking? He invented a system of how the ledger system works, and it could be done across with messengers, across continents, across borders, where people cooperate with each other, that they set up a trustworthy system that you hold notes of this bank, and that notes is redeemable of gold. You can always go into a bank and give them the banknote. Eventually, the dollar followed the same path, and it was just one giant ledger system. When I send you a Zelle right now, let's say we're both on Chase, it's a little easier because we both have Chase.
Sure.
And I send you $100. Chase updates my account
And my account.
and your account
Right.
simultaneously. Now, they still have to do something called final settlement, which you'll always see that right after you send it, it will say pending.
Right.
Why does it say pending? Is because they just want to make sure, what if I have a check that somebody else at the same time clicked enter, and now I don't have enough money to send you the Zelle. They're going to authorize that check to go through, and maybe your Zelle won't.
Right.
So only after it says posted, that's final settlement within Chase. Then if one of us had Bank of America and one of us had Chase, and those two banks will settle, I think nowadays it's once a week, where they will have so much economic activity going on in the ledger system
Right.
between the two banks. At the end, they'll tally it up. Chase sent Bank of America $9 million. Bank of America sent Chase $10 million. So now it has to be settled up. $1 million has to be sent back and settle the difference. That's the ledger system of the dollar. Now, the reason why the dollar has value is because it's scarce. Now, I know we're going to laugh about that later when we discuss the scarcity of the dollar, but it is still scarce because if you want to get hold of a few dollars, let's say you need money.
Especially in a third world country.
No, not third world country. If you want to get hold of dollars right now, you have to provide a service. You have to serve somebody. You have to serve others and have somebody part with his hard-earned dollars. You can't just print it. I mean, there's a term for that. That's counterfeiting, but you can't print it.
Right.
So there is a scarcity to it, and the fact that everyone uses it gives it the value, and it does have a use case.
This scarcity is also backed by the government,
Yeah,
which presumably has a limited amount that they're offering for
Yeah, for sure.
circulation. And
For sure. We're going to discuss how dollars are created soon. The way dollars, just actually, why soon? Let's do it now because we want to get back to talking about, I went off on a bit of a tangent. But today, the way dollars are created, when you go to a bank loan and you want to buy a house and you want to take out a $500,000 mortgage, so the bankers have clearance from the Federal Reserve, which is, by the way, a private company. The Federal Reserve has nothing to do with the government. They're the only ones licensed by the government to approve the concept of printing US dollars. It's important to understand that. And I just remembered the tangent because we're going to discuss how governments were never able to create fiat currency suddenly. So, okay, put that on hold. Remember I said they always had to do it in a sneaky way. Okay, so you go to borrow $500,000 and, you have to jump through all the hoops, showing your credit that you're good for it, the collateral and all that. You're putting down 20% or whatever it is, whatever you're eligible for. And when it comes closing and that mortgage is approved and somebody clicks enter, that they, all the T's were dotted and the I's were crossed. I know it's reversed. That $500,000 appears out of nowhere. The same way a Bitcoin miner mines, 6.25 Bitcoins, which is the current mining block reward. And when he cryptographically solves the puzzle, which don't worry, we'll talk about it later, he just receives 6 Bitcoins that were created. They just created with the click of a button, $500,000. Now, the way it works is you pay the interest. And as you pay that mortgage down, the interest comes from economic activity that you have a job. So you're able to pay the principal and the interest. The principal goes away and gets deleted from circulation, so to speak. But obviously, your interest stays. So the amount of dollars being introduced into the world and disappearing from the world is highly volatile. But we know at any given point, there's always much more loans being taken out than there are those being returned.
Right.
Just because the economic activity is always growing, the GDP is growing, the population in the United States is not growing through birth, but it's growing through people coming over the border, and those people have a lot of children. So there is more economic activity growing. Yeah, the replacement, I think it's 1.8 now, right? Replacement is 2.1. Replacement, that if every couple has 2.1 children, that's exact. I believe it might even be 2.2. Once you get to 2.3, you're growing.
That's in America.
Right, in the United States. No, anywhere. 2.1 is the replacement, is the exact replacement that a population stays the same.
Why? Because the 0.1 just died from
Yeah,
natural
infant
causes
mortalities and stuff like that, yeah. Whereas the United States, I believe, is holding somewhere 1.8. There are European countries that are like, if not for the Muslim,
1 point something.
besides for the Muslim population, are like 1.5.
Right.
Like Switzerland, Sweden, Denmark, and
the Western world.
and the Muslim population in Great Britain and many of these European countries are actually like 5, 6, where the native Europeans to that country are way below replacement numbers. So back to the printing into existence and out of existence. So that's how money's made, and that ledger system, the way Bitcoin is distinct from the ledger system of the US dollar and the pound and the euro and the yen and the yuan and all the fiat currencies of the world, is that two major differences. One of them is the ledger. Who holds the ledger for the central bankers? A tiny handful of people. Basically the Federal Reserve and the very, very top of the central banking system. That they have access to that ledger. Now, you know your balance, but that's it. So every person knows his balance and nothing else. And the central bankers and the Federal Reserve, they know everybody's balance. So they have the entire ledger. Whereas in the Bitcoin payment system,
everyone has access.
Everyone has everything. If you want what they call running a node, to download the entire Bitcoin protocol, which is the software, which runs all the searches to make sure that the ledger is accurate, if I only have one Bitcoin, I send you a Bitcoin and I send it to somebody else.
It's all even. Doesn't change the number.
That it doesn't work. It gets rejected. It's like you only have one Bitcoin. You can't send it to two people. Because digitally, there's a big challenge. I can send you an MP3 song that I like and send it to another good friend of ours.
Essentially a copy of it.
They're both copies, and I can send it to both of you. And there's no reason to.
There's no accountability system that's going to be able
And there's
to
no
say
reason
that there's only supposed to be one of them.
Right. There's no reason to verify
Right.
that, because I can send it to you both. They're both essentially copies. Whereas when we get to talking about the fundamentals of the cryptography of Bitcoin, it's a system designed that it can all be traced and verified on what they call blockchain, which is just a glorified way of saying pages in a ledger. Each block is a new page, and you can never go back and change the old pages. Now, so that's one difference. So the first difference we said is that in the dollar, the pound, that's just called fiat. Let's get this out of the way. Fiat literally is a Latin word, which means so be it, decreed. That government said, this shall be. That's called fiat. It's a decree. And the dollars we have is a decree. The governments tell you, you must trade in it. You must pay your taxes in it. If you look on it, it says this is legal tender, blah, 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 whatever it says. Legal tender means. And there are very complex laws about you can't send the government a truckload of corn or sugar, even though it has a lot of value, to pay your taxes.
Right.
And you can't pay it in the shekel or the pound. Now, you can transact with somebody in the shekel and the pound, but not in a. There are a lot of restrictions. There are complex laws. Some of them are not enforced, but the majority, there's no reason to trade in anything other than the dollar in the United States. No reason to trade with anything other than the local currencies in some places, with the exception of the US dollar being the reserve currency. So there's certain things everywhere in the world is denominated in dollars. But that's another discussion. There's going to have to be a part 2 to this Bitcoin. So we have a lot to really unpack. When you go through the ripple and network effect and almost like lightning bolt effects of fiat currency, how they came to be and how it affects the market so strongly and how immoral it is and how unsustainable it is.
Right. So just back to the thing
Yes.
you mentioned
Oh, the
about
second
the government not
So I
being...
said the first thing. The first thing difference is that here a handful of people have the ledger, and here everyone has the ledger. So everyone knows the value. So if you own 10 Bitcoins, there's nobody that can change that. It's on, you hold the private keys. Nobody can ever send your Bitcoin anywhere else. It's written on a page that you received 10 Bitcoins, let's say, and there's no page after that says you sent it anywhere.
Right.
And nobody can ever go in and send it for you.
If I could just mention one more thing in terms of when you speak about the overall how the Bitcoin works. A lot of people might have a question and say, hey, but like, how do you know that the person who originally built it out doesn't have everything about
Doesn't
Bitcoin?
have what? What's your question?
Someone doesn't have a backdoor to change the way
no,
it
we're
works.
going to get into that too.
I just want to make sure that
we're going to get to a point. We have no
every...
choice but to jump in. We're going to get to a point where we're going to have to start from the ground up. We're going to go through all the people.
Right. For now, I just want to mention one thing. I want to say that whatever your questions are about the validity, and people might just jump to conclusions and say, well, how do you know that people are not going to abuse the system and change the code or whatnot? All of those things about Bitcoin are completely open, the way that they've been built out, in a way that there's millions of people that try to crack it, open it. There's no way to do it at all. And if there was, they would do it. We could go into details, and Yoeli, I'm sure, will share how complex and difficult it would be to break the code or break the way that it works.
So first,
but just don't doubt the fact that when he says that this is how it works, this is the ledger, you can't send one Bitcoin to two people at the same time, that like maybe some guy is going to come up with a cool idea of how to do it. It's just not going to work.
It's impossible. Okay.
So we'll go there.
I think, Alex, what you're saying is,
it's a disclaimer.
The listeners right now should trust us that it's secure. Otherwise, just for the sake of this part of the presentation.
Correct. Don't get stuck on maybe there is a way.
And by the way, anyone thinks that Bitcoin could be hacked, I have a great idea for them. Because if you go onto the blockchain, okay, you look at the top like 10 wallets. Okay, we don't know which one's which, but we can get a pretty much idea. We know for sure which one's MicroStrategy's main one, because it corresponds with the news.
Billions of dollars.
Right. So the U.S. government is probably still the top holder right after Grayscale. So they have over 200,000 Bitcoins. We know Michael Saylor has 205,000. We know the original Satoshi wallet, which he never touched, has just under a million.
And just to be clear, that's out of 21 million Bitcoins that will ever exist.
Okay.
Of which a good chunk are never really going to get moved.
So here's the idea. Just focus on those top few wallets.
Right.
Okay, Bitcoin's trading right now at around in the upper 60s. Let's say $67,000. So get in there. Just target one wallet that has a million Bitcoins. That's worth $67 billion. And just put out the word that get all the greatest hackers in the world, tell them you'll pay them each $1 billion a piece. And all you need for yourself is $1 billion just to hack that private coin, because all you got to do is guess the numbers that does the private key to that, and then you can send the Bitcoin to your wallet. And everyone knows it can't be done. It's been tried. There's nothing. I mean, when we discuss the cryptography of it, the amount of options of numbers there are to guess a private key is greater than the amount of how many atoms, not Adam and Eve, but atoms as in those tiny particles that make up everything. By the way,
by a lot, by the way.
That's why you should never trust an atom. They just make up everything.
Oh gosh.
Anyway, I heard that joke.
Cut. Start over. This was a fail.
Yeah, I've been pretty good until now.
Okay, I just want to warn our listeners that Yoeli's
I can't help myself
puns
sometimes.
are gonna get so much worse.
Yeah, but this is not mine. I've heard that many. The first time I read that, it was in an article, actually Nakamoto, from Mordechai Schiller. He ended up with "Don't trust atoms; they make up everything." Anyway, so I love giving credits when it's due. You know why? Because when it's my joke, I don't say anything, and then you know it's mine. So what I was saying was, more than there are atoms in our universe, the entire observable universe with the biggest telescopes, all the Milky Way galaxy, all the other galaxies that can be seen. We're talking here about 312 trillion light years of estimated distance. If you estimate the amount of atoms in that entire, we're talking about the Earth, the Sun, all the planets, and all the trillions of stars, that number is somewhat comparable to the amount of options there are in today's encryption of the 256-bit.
Right.
Which is flipping a coin 256 times and all the possible arrangements of 256. The way you get that number is take the number 2 and multiply it by itself too 256 times.
Right.
Eventually when you get this much zeros, the next flip becomes that many zeros, and it just keeps doubling itself.
The human brain doesn't really have the capacity to understand the exponential, like these numbers. The number with 79 zeros is not like,
right.
I can barely imagine number 79.
Right. No, people will be like, oh, it's just 79 more than a million.
No.
Right?
No. So exactly. So like 1 and 79 zeros, you just picture that number. There's not like one out of that is your quality.
And by the way, just to get this out of the way, if people have one of the most famous questions about Bitcoin's security is, what if somebody invents quantum computing that can just do so many more, that can just spend time guessing those digits, which today is in the form of 24 words in the correct order.
Right.
Just keeps trying and tries everything computationally, just like a regular trial and error. So what if we get this? It's the most common question across the entire world about Bitcoin. How can I feel safe storing all my wealth in something that, at the end of the day, my private keys is this string of letters and numbers alternated, which can be represented in 24 words in a certain order.
Right.
And a computer can guess it. So the answer, first of all, is true. Now, today, with the computer power that we have, let's forget about what we have. Let's say the computer power became much better than we have today, that you have a processor that can guess 2 trillion combinations per second. So see, a trillion has only, how many zeros?
9.
9 zeros. No, 8. 10. I mean, a total of 10 digits.
9
right?
zeros, yeah.
Yeah, okay. The 6 figures, right, 9 zeros after the 10. I'm all confused. 1,000, million is 6 figures. Billion is...
Oh, billion. Trillion is 12.
12. Okay, sorry. Yes. So it can guess 2 trillion per second.
Yeah.
How long would it take? Here's a quiz. How long will it take for it to guess its first... How many years will it take for this computer that does 2 trillion guesses? We're talking about complete guesses per second. How many years will it take for it to get its first one?
A couple million years.
What'd you say?
A couple million years.
Okay, so Alex says a couple of million. The answer is 2 trillion.
Oh.
All right, 2 trillion years if it can do 2 trillion per second. Now, there's a thought exercise that's very important. I know there's tangents, but I promise we will gather everything together. Alex is my he's my ADD lasso friend. Like, whew.
I got my own ADD too.
Right, exactly. So I think everyone today is somewhat ADD with the smartphones. So our attention spans have been shrinking exponentially in the last 70 years.
We're gonna have to explain what
I don't think
exponential means right now again.
The good news is that it can't shrink anymore. So Baruch Hashem, humanity, thank God, will slowly start expanding its attention span soon. You
Hopefully.
see it already. People put their phones away in restaurants, and it's happening. But in any case, so there's a thought exercise that we must do, that everyone has to do to understand exponentials, not just for security. The real exponentials you have to understand is the printing, the exponential printing, why the dollar cannot last many, many more years.
Right.
And so the first step is, there's like all these old riddles where you have this vine that's surrounding a lake, and every day it doubles itself. This vine is growing around this lake. You just picture a lake. And at what day, and it says within 30 days, this vine grows and surrounds the entire lake. At what day is it at the halfway point around the lake?
It's like the day before.
Exactly. Not day number 15, but day number 29.
Exactly.
So that's like, you can get introduced to that. But the area, people can understand that. But then when you get exponentials like times 10, and sometimes there's tiny movements, and then it only moves a drop, and then day number 29, it just surrounds the whole lake in one shot, because it was starting from one atom to two atoms till it hit a molecule. But the thought exercise I was talking about is let's examine the relationship between a million, a billion, and a trillion. Have you ever done this before? I've told this to you. So how long is a million seconds?
A million seconds is 11
days.
11 days.
Okay, it's not exact, because anybody can take out a calculator. You don't got to trust me. So now, don't use your calculator if you're listening, and just imagine, what is a billion seconds? Just be honest with yourself. Just understand how exponential works. It is 32,000 years. That's just a billion. I'm sorry, 32 years.
32 years.
No, we're gonna get.
But that's
right.
still, by the way, I feel like
32 years.
The first reaction for a person is going to be like, oh, if that one's 11 days, so that one must be like, I don't know, 4 months.
Right.
Something like that.
Right. It's 32 years, because it's times 1,000. And here's the much bigger one. That a trillion seconds is 32,000 years. So you have to think, if you believe that the world was created, less than 6,000 years ago, there's barely been not even a quarter of a trillion seconds that have passed from the first day in the Garden of Eden.
Right.
So, but the average person, because we grew up with, he's a millionaire, he's a billionaire, and soon we're gonna have a trillionaire, right? And that number, that difference of a million and a billion and a trillion, we created this relationship as if it's almost
linear.
It's almost the next step.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas when you get to a million, you got to start all from the beginning and do that whole thing again to get to another million.
Right.
Then you have to do that 998.
1,000x your wealth.
Right. You have to do that 998 more times. And so we're talking about, that's why when you have a number with 79 zeros. So the real answer to the question about quantum computing is that even if somebody invents quantum computing that can do quadrillions and quadrillions of processes per second, all they have to do is, the Bitcoin people who don't want to lose their wealth are just going to, instead of having 256-bit, which is our current security, which we said is 79 zeros, they just have to change it to flipping a coin 512 times, which is not double. Do you realize double would be, double of 256-bit is 257-bit, is double that. Because you flip the coin one more time, now you have double the amount. You remember we said it's times,
effort and energy.
It's times two. It's times two. So 79 zeros, 257-bit is 158 zeros. And then 258-bit is over 300 zeros. By the time you get to 512-bit, the amount of combinations are it's hard to imagine how many zeros we're talking about, how far you have to travel with those zeros. But it's not adding 79. Those zeros go to the moon and back. So at that point, even if we can always stay ahead of the security by just hiking the security, besides for the fact that if quantum computing happens, it's not going to be like one day a guy wakes up and he's like, oh, I made quantum computing. It's going to be many small discoveries.
Right.
And the smartest minds in cryptography and in computer science and hacking skills are, thank God, in the Bitcoin community around the world. And they've been upgrading and protecting this network, and we'll get to that. In a moment.
Right.
So now so just to bring it back, tell me if I'm doing good.
You're doing amazing for the first time, especially.
Yeah.
I'll be surprised if less than 40 people watch this.
So the first major difference is that everyone has the ledger. So I was saying everybody can download the node. Download, meaning running a node means you download all the pages and the software, and you have every single page, which right now I believe it's just under 800,000 pages from 2009, and you have every transaction, and you run the software that verifies it.
Right.
So it verifies
this is
everything.
a thing that people often refer to Bitcoin as being a decentralized currency, meaning there's not one party. And this is, we're going to go into this, I'm sure, why it's different from other cryptocurrencies, but if you could put it that way. But there's not one party that has full control of it. There's many parties that could maybe impact it slightly in terms of the price or whatnot.
The large holders.
Correct.
The U.S. government was selling it for the last 2 years. They finally stopped. They got a little smart. I mean, they didn't get smart, but some smart person told them to stop. Because
they became less smart.
less smart, right? I mean, they've been selling for the last 2 years because they confiscated from Silk Road the illegal activity on the websites many years ago. They've been holding on to several 100,000 coins, and in the last 2 years, they were the ones that kept putting like 10,000 Bitcoins at a time onto the market when it was 22,000, 25,000, 30,000, 40,000. Now they stopped. They're starting to realize that they want to compete with the ETFs, which we'll talk about.
The financial institutions.
With the financial institutions. So they still hold over 200,000. Now, obviously, if anybody who's holding 200,000 Bitcoin puts it on the open market in one shot, they will crash the price. And I would say it would crash it. I mean, nowadays with the institutions, not as much as you think, but yeah, it will fall 50% value for, I'd say, for a few weeks.
Right.
But then it's going to be bought up in fragments by people around the world who are rushing to get it on sale.
Correct.
And then you just transferred another large percent. You realize 200,000 Bitcoin is like a significant tiny percent of the entire supply, which is going to be only be 21 million.
Correct. Well, it's also there's also the supply, that there's a total number of Bitcoins. There are a total number of Bitcoins that are actually in circulation. Yeah. And then there's good 70% of Bitcoins that are being held by people that are so committed to not sell it whatsoever. So that big dump of 200,000 would be within the pool of, let's say, 30% of all Bitcoin in the market. That would constitute a massive chunk of it. That's why it's going to have such a profound effect. And then there's people that have FOMO and they're scared to start selling.
But again, this is a real tangent because you're just saying who can affect it. Right. Nobody can affect it more than...
Nobody has the... Correct.
Nobody has the power to control it. If we want to make a change to upgrade the security, 51% of people connected to the network have to all literally click enter at the same time just to make a tiny good upgrade, like to make the security better. So there's no way 51% of people holding Bitcoin are ever going to agree to change the software that you can have more than 21 million coins. The major value that Bitcoin has is its scarcity.
That's literally why it was created. Business.
True scarcity. So it would not make any logical sense.
Okay, so what I want to do is...
So what we talked about, so far we have only one difference. Right. Now we have to talk about the second major difference between the dollar and Bitcoin.
Let's do that, but let's take a quick break.
Sure.
The break is over, and now we were in the middle of a discussion.
The thing I realized as soon as I stepped away was that I probably shouted over you quite a few times. Not probably, I definitely did. I don't know how many times.
Unacceptable.
But I will try to, especially for the sake of our listeners who want to hear the rest of the question. Sometimes I get so excited because I know where you're going. And I'm like, for the sake of time, let's
Yeah, I'm going to throw in the background. Basically, Yoeli and I have been having many conversations over the years about interesting subjects. One of those subjects that has been particularly interesting and particularly frequent recently was Bitcoin, because the events that were happening and kind of the excitement of not just from the market, but from our own understanding of Bitcoin that came through, that it is the future of currency, the future of money.
The greatest technological monetary advancement in the history of man.
Right. So this is something that we're going to try to deliver. And because of that excitement and because of the fact that we already had a lot of these conversations off camera, we kind of could finish each other's sentences. So right now I think the challenge is like, I know exactly. Let me mention this one more thing that we also like trying to like, remember that one thing that was a good idea. Let's talk to... So our listeners... Apologies to hopefully have a structured dialogue here that's going to help you understand better, because the whole idea of Big Talk is that we give you value, and this is what we're going to try to do. So on that note, Yoeli, please, I invite you to continue explaining to us the second aspect in which Bitcoin is similar to money, or
how it's different.
How it's different. Okay, please go ahead.
The way it's similar to the dollar, again, to review, is in every way. It's exactly the same thing.
Usage and...
It's exactly the same thing. What's the dollar? What's Bitcoin? What's the dollar?
Right.
It's a digital currency.
Exchange.
It's a digital currency. No, I'm saying with the fundamental dollar. It's a digital currency which conveys value, and when you transfer it, you no longer have it,
Right.
and it's instead of being a physical, coin or something you can hold, it's a digital money.
Very good.
So it's exactly the same. So the second major difference is that there's only a handful of people who can print money, but they have their hands on the money printer all the time.
Especially recently with this economy.
Right. Which is part of the law of exponential that we're going to have to get to, of how, right, for example, right now, they have to print $1.1 trillion every 90 days. Now, again, that's
Wait 1 second. That's for
Now.
to cover their obligations or for
just
debt?
basic obligations of all the budget, that anything that's beyond tax collecting, and the national debt, which, because it's 34 trillion at the current current interest rates, if you that's roughly, I believe at the moment it's 1.4 trillion per year.
So it's probably a very given thing, but for our listeners, I think it's important to understand that printing money devalues your currency, even though it seems to accomplish something. When the government says, okay, we have a new bill or a new thing we want to support that's going to require for us to print more money, a lot of times, and the same thing was during COVID, people get excited. They think that, okay, now, like, okay, I'm going to get more dollars. These checks that I'm going to receive in mail, stimulus checks, all these things, they seem exciting because in the short run, we only think in the numbers of what's in front of us. And we say, look, if I have another $5,000 this month, I could go ahead and buy this one thing that I couldn't afford before, which may be true this month, but you're really taking way more than $5,000 in your following year of your life. Like, you probably, would you take $5,000 now if you knew you're going to be paying $2,000 every month for the next 3 years?
Right.
Probably not, because the numbers don't add up. So
you remember me yelling during the beginning of COVID when the stimulus was going out? I was yelling in shul every day. So I was like, my veins were popping.
People are excited.
I was like, where is it coming from? They're printing it. That means all your future spending is going to be diluted.
Right. So the tragedy of what you just described in terms of printing, how much they have to print, is that I think now people in this economy and already starting to realize it more, just from what I'm hearing about people, like seeing like wow, like the inflation is insane. Things that used to cost this, it's been 1 year now they cost double. Like it doesn't make any sense.
The problem is they can't stop. There's no system that they can stop printing. Like I just mentioned to you right now, just to get by. Forget about the unfunded liabilities. Unfunded liabilities, which means that it is not on their balance sheets. If you look at the next 50 years, it's somewhere close to $200 trillion if you count Medicaid and Social Security alone is a big portion of that number for the next 50 years. But I'm talking about just covering the actual balance sheets that's in their budgets, which includes military and all the useless government offices that, are paid to just be government officials to do things that are useless. The idea is, just to understand, in 130 years ago, the federal government was 3% of national GDP in the United States, and it passed the 50% mark a few years ago already. That means today, if you take the entire GDP, which is gross domestic product, all value of economic activity in the United States, and more than 50% of that goes through the government's hands, of just how big they are. If you include military and everything else that they're doing.
Right. Well, that's kind of the problem with the whole system.
I'll give you an example. Something. Sorry, I have to.
No,
sorry that I'm interrupting you. Like these little details. Like in my business, we pay workers' comp for every dollar of payroll because we're high risk, so to speak, because we drive around.
People don't know which business you're in.
In dump trucks collecting garbage from construction sites. So the budget just for the offices, the size of the building on Church Street in Lower Manhattan for the workers, for New York State Insurance Fund, but workers' comp is federally mandated. Just the New York State Insurance Fund is the state one for people who can't get private insurance. That's just one aspect. It's never ending. Forget the FBI and the CIA. Everyone knows about those. But the amount of federal offices that there are, the Labor Department, ensuring that you pay minimum wage and that you're treating your workers fairly, these are all big office buildings with thousands of people working.
Right. Well, look, I'll put it this way. The problem is not just that. Like, if there was the government is offering a productive solution that would come out of hiring a new department, making another set of laws, then it would make sense. But the problem is that all of these things are actually a lot of times making things worse or completely ineffective, creating a massive amount of inefficiency. This is kind of like a libertarian argument, but the fact that sometimes, not sometimes, the reality is that most systems in the world work best when they kind of offset each other. Supply and demand create incentives, create things for people that they become drawn towards, and then the human ingenuity makes it that people come to the solutions that work. When the government steps in and starts trying to say, okay, we see how the system's working, but we want to just make the flow a little bigger here and a little less here.
You're going into
And
another whole topic about government intervention
correct.
in our lives.
They break things. So, but I'm
Yeah.
saying financially, this is what happens as well. They create these massive departments because they want to create some kind of better economic equality or economic performance. But all these things cost enormous amount of money, and actually they shoot themselves in the
Right.
leg. And economically, everyone is really suffering. That's why the printing money. They say we'll increase the budget in this area because it's going to be better for everyone.
Okay.
But what ends up happening is they print more money. Everyone starts, all those people that were supposed to benefit now may or may not have benefited. Now everyone else is suffering. So
Okay, so but why would they print money? Just like no Bitcoiners would agree to have more than 21 million Bitcoin, why is it that the dollar is exponentially growing? And that's the other law of exponential. That it took us like 50 years from when the printing started. No, it took us from when the printing started, really 1913. It took us almost over 90 years to hit our first trillion in debt. And now we're at 34 trillion, and the number is going to be growing to by a few trillion per year, and then exponentially, which means if everything sustains itself, 20 years from now, we are going to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt, and the amount of money printing per day is going to be in the trillions.
So
that's what exponential.
It's very hard for me to understand where that goes.
That's the law of X. That's why they call it a spiral.
Right.
You hear it all the time. The debt spiral. How does a spiral work? A spiral doesn't go like that. A spiral goes like that.
Right.
So the way the system is designed, it's the debt spiral and the whole spiral of fiat currencies. Why it's a failed experiment is because it doesn't go in circles. It keeps going out of control. So each loop, this is 30 trillion. This is 60 trillion. This is 150 trillion. This is 300 trillion. And as the spiral gets bigger, that's the law of why we did that thought exercise with the 11 days, 32 years, 32,000 years, is because people say the dollar, lasted until now. Like it will continue. It's like, no, but we were at much earlier stages of the spiral. But to answer that question, why would they print the money if it's harming themselves?
Yeah, please do tell.
The answer is it does not harm them. Now, anybody who has been wealthy has not very much been affected by inflation in a negative way.
Because they don't store fiat.
Because wealthy people never hold cash. It's called, instead of calling them wealthy and poor, let's call them the asset class and the non-asset class, which includes the middle class can be divided. Like the lower middle class are mainly non-asset. The upper middle class have assets.
If there is middle class still, honestly.
Right.
There is no middle class. That's why it's divided.
So if the ones who turn on the money printers, their buckets to catch that money is very close to the source. So, for example, the federal government, they're not, they print the money. They're able to then execute. They make what they're really good at is getting elected, let's say, right? So they're all sitting in Congress. And now they're going to say, okay, we approve a new spending bill, which always means spending, but you can't collect it from taxes.
Which is a reflection of our virtue.
So let's print it. So they're not affected because their personal holdings, they know because money's being printed, they're going to put it into stocks, bonds, and real estate and commodities. But mainly stocks, bonds, and real estate has always been the royal court of the three major classes of assets that people stored their money in. And many people, I know that when I was in my 20s and I started making slightly more money than I needed to live, when I was living in Eretz Yisrael, I instinctively knew I can't keep money in cash, like in the bank. I've never had money in the bank. I just knew that doesn't make any sense. So you have to put it into the S&P, okay, put some in Amazon back then, it was growing. But you want to transfer the money into an asset. Now, if you would say this to the fiat printers, they'll say 100%.
Right.
That's what you must do. And that's what Keynesian economics is. Keep economic activity going. But what about the non-asset class? The person who works at McDonald's, and which is the majority, by the way, in numbers of the country. People that work waiting tables, flipping burgers, driving Ubers, they're the non-asset class. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and they're being robbed from. They're the ones that they have no way of taking the money. They worked hard. This guy did double shifts for a week because he wants to go away to visit his mother in another state. And he worked Uber. He did double shift. He drove 14, 16 hours a day.
Right.
So now he saved money that he's supposed to put into the future, that the money will be there for him because he stored his time and energy for the future. That's what money is.
But it just devalues because
it just devalued. Think of morally what it does to the poor people around the world, of how a good society is a society that's forward-looking. It's called that have lower time preference. A high time preference means today. I need the money now. Lower time preference means I'll put the money away for the future. So,
I mean, how many economies or how many societies really have that? It's not in the
what?
Western world. There's a chance for that, but they
Well, it's more of a general idea. Even if you go to, like, say, an economy that suffered recently, like Argentina, there's India. There are upper class people that have a lower time preference, and the lower class people have a
right,
higher time preference. But overall, as a society, when the United States started becoming a quote unquote wealthy country, which is for another day to discuss what does it mean, how does a country become wealthy, um, people started having a lower time preference, where everyone thought about their children and the future and college funds and life insurance, and people thought about giving to their grandchildren, not just their children. Now that causes a society to become more sane, moral, prudent, sober. They're a better society.
right.
And try to think of the extreme opposite, like when Argentina was having 70% inflation. You got your paycheck,
You better do something with it
you made
ASAP.
a mad dash for the supermarket.
Right.
Because all you can think about is, I need to turn this money right now into milk and bread for my children. Now, who has time to think about children and grandchildren when money just inflated 70%
Right.
in the last month?
Well, supermarket is only one of those things. Alternatively, people could, and this is what dollar has been historically until, I mean, probably right now still, but things are definitely more out of control in terms of people would actually buy other currencies. I grew up in Eastern Europe. I know that whenever you wanted to store value in something that's going to be more stable, if people would accumulate a little bit of wealth or a little bit of money, they would convert it into dollars and store dollars if they
You're
didn't know
talking
any
about
better.
You're talking about storage,
Correct.
and the upper
Oh, you're
class.
talking about these people didn't even have. You're talking about the people that don't even have money.
They're getting
to
their
store.
paycheck. Their house is bare. Of
Right.
course, the upper class person in Argentina, he's the asset class. He can
Right.
store it in dollars.
Okay.
And he's not as much affected.
Fair.
Because he's getting a wage that's somewhat consistent with inflation. But the person at the bottom which is the majority of the villagers and the
Right.
citizens,
It's gonna be gone
the
if
blue
it-
collar laborers, they're running to the supermarket. What I'm trying to bring out is, what does that do for a society when you cannot store your value over time? I worked for it. That's the whole point of money. It's supposed to be liquid good. That's why the free market never produced a fiat currency. And the free market would have never agreed to a fiat currency. Remember?
So how did they come about?
Oh, okay. So we're coming back to that. Remember I said put a hold on that?
Yes.
So the greatest example in our times, there's a lot of interesting suggested readings that when we get this on YouTube, there's a lot of suggested reading that we can drop on the bottom as in the description. But in 1913, Great Britain, no, this was 1914, sorry. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was formed. In 1914, to join World War I, which many around the world felt was a silly war because, the Kaiser of Germany was assassinated, and it became this very egotistical war, which eventually led to World War II, which was a vital war that America had to join. But World War I, they did not have to join, technically. And they would have not been able to fund it. There was no popularity in the streets to fund the war. So up until this point in history, people had money. Now, we said money is, we actually didn't say it clearly, but we were talking about money is the way people choose the scarcest object that has the properties of money that is best for that ecosystem, and that was gold. And kings and noblemen and anybody ruling a country, rulers, let's just call them rulers, if they wanted to fight a war that would be long-lasting and costly, they would have to tax their people. And it's very hard going door to door collecting gold when the people are not on board. So that's why, interestingly enough, if you look at there's a few interesting books about the history of wars of the medieval times. The average war lasted like between 1 and 2 weeks in like a 200-year span. I'm not talking about like the French Revolution where there was, I'm talking about between
Most
countries,
wars.
the frivolous wars over territory and countries. They lasted barely 2 weeks because there wasn't enough money for it. The two who had money to spend training a military, they would hire these outside mercenaries, and like Austria would hire this one, and Hungary would hire that army, and they would fight in this field, like literally, like in the movies. They'd be charging each other and fighting, and then these messages would arrive on horsemen to both sides, reporting who's winning and who's losing, and then quickly other messages would be, or the same messages would be sent back and say, let's sit down at the table and agree to draw up the borders. And that's why when I was growing up, the story, you didn't grow up with the storybooks that I did, but all these names: Transylvania, Bohemia, and
I grew up with those names because they were much closer geographically.
right, right. I grew up born in Ukraine.
What do
Grew
you
up in
mean? You
Moldova.
haven't been to Transylvania? It was on the books. It was
Right.
outside my window.
What's Prussia? What, right? I know my family in the 1800s, all Doppelts come from Galicia. You can't find Galicia on the map. I mean, today it was swallowed up with Poland. I mean, the country of Pressburg now is Bratislavia, nestled in between Hungary and Czechoslovakia. Those borders were drawn up. We know even the Russian and Ukrainian borders, and there was they moved all the time. Those were the small wars. We couldn't have a World War I that lasted 4 years and a World War II that lasted 6 years.
Right.
So essentially, without the printing of money, the fiat introduction,
Yeah, tell us what happened in America.
we would have not been
specifically
able to
also.
have war. Okay.
Right.
So what happened was that first in Great Britain did it first, and America followed immediately afterwards because England was much closer to the war, and they had to jump in. America joined later, and they just started issuing war bonds that you can redeem at a future time at a greater amount, but against money that they didn't have. So there was a certain amount. I think at its height they had 16 tons of gold in their reserves, and they started, which by the way is a finite amount. It's our laws of exponentials today in the trillions. The amount of dollars in circulation at this point was barely in the billions.
Right.
Don't forget why. You couldn't print a dollar that was not backed by gold.
Well, at that point, right.
Right.
Until.
So you can so if you calculate how much gold the United States was holding, you'd be able to figure out how many dollars were in existence. And I remember I calculated more than once. It was a small number. It was in the low billions, a few billion. So people say billion, trillion. No, it would have taken us. It took us from 1913 from having like $3 billion dollars in circulation, which by the way was mainly printed. It wasn't digital yet.
Right.
To get all the way up to all the way to double itself from 3 billion to 6 billion was a very big deal.
Right.
And then to keep adding billions till you got to your first trillion, which is 1,000 billion, took 90 years. But now we're at that part of the cycle. And now if you count all the digital aspects of money, it's a very disputed number because nobody really knows. Remember we said that only a few people know the real number?
Right.
But it's and the number's always changing. As they click enter for a loan, the number pops in, and when something's repaid, it goes out. But it's well over $100 trillion in circulation. So that's that law of exponential we talked about. It should have taken us 32,000 years
to get to this point.
To get to this point.
As opposed to the shortcut.
90
Okay,
years.
so tell us what happened in
So they started issuing
war.
They started issuing war bonds, and they didn't tell their people about it. And that's what I was saying is people would have never agreed. They only told them about it much later on. They started this new concept called fractional reserve banking.
That's in the U.S. or that's in
This
Britain?
was Britain.
Okay.
The U.S. followed less than a year later. And that is that, which we still have today, fractional reserve means in order to issue a note, a banknote, we don't need to actually have that amount of gold. We can have a fraction. So we can decide what the rule is. And they made a rule of 1 to 3.
Right.
So we can issue for every pound of gold, you should only be able to have 4.5 pounds, but the other kind of pounds, the Great British,
Right. The weight.
the Great British pound, right? But now we can do 3 times that amount, which is 13.5. So now we can give you 13.5 pounds to 1 pound of gold. And that was the beginning of fractional reserve. And they were able to then issue those bonds. And they were able
sounds like a bubble.
Yeah. Okay. But they were still kind of limited. That's why it wasn't until 1971 that we got up the gold standard. So the United States did the same thing, also to jump into World War I. I don't know how they communicated those ideas across the ocean. They had the telegraph. Oh, the telephone was around already. The transatlantic cable was down. So they were able to speak to each other. I don't know exactly. Don't forget, during war is a time that everything's an emergency and you can take shortcuts with human liberties like never before. Now, no person in the United States would ever agree if we would have said, all this gold, these dollars you're holding, all your economic activity, all that hard blood, sweat, and tears you put in to build your fortune, we're about to start inflating that away slowly. They would have never agreed.
Right.
Because the United States only found out about it afterwards, in 1933, when FDR confiscated everyone's gold. This was after the Great Depression. We're going to have to talk about that. There must be in another episode to understand how they lied to us, how they lied to the American people throughout starting from 1914, how the 1920s, they printed money and the stock market was booming, which led to the Great Depression. And they found a way to blame everything on the marketplace instead of blaming themselves for starting to print money.
Right.
So the 1929 we know was the ultimate bubble. They had just tripled the amount of dollars and did not triple the amount of gold. So of course that led to this crazy amount of money being available on the streets, which we
But
call
it's not backed by
liquidity.
right.
It came out of nowhere. It was just created, and we had that crash, and then they started, and then we would have recovered from the crash and picked up where we left off because, we only tripled our supply, so everyone's money was diluted, but we're okay. But that's when they started the quantitative easing, which is basically getting further and issuing more, and that's when they stepped in, and it took so many years to recover from the Great Depression. And in 1933, at one of the great steps of it, FDR then signed the bill to confiscate everybody's gold. And then when it was returned to them in the later part of that decade, the dollar was no longer a 20th of an ounce; it was a 35th of an ounce. So even though they basically you got slightly less than half, slightly more than half the value back.
Right.
When they, so to speak, they didn't give you back the gold, but they made it not illegal to hold gold, but made it illegal to trade in gold, but it was still redeemable. But the dollar itself now suddenly, proverbially, was worth slightly more than half the amount of the original gold you gave them, because now it's a 35th of an ounce instead of a 20th of an ounce. So the next 30 years until we actually finally got off the gold standard in 1971 completely, where it was announced by President Nixon, we are off. The US dollar is no longer redeemable by gold. They kept pushing this Keynesian economics theory that if we keep pushing and pulling parts in the market to control how much, we can control human behavior. And then they came up with this idea of this economist, what was his name, Keynes. The idea is that inflation's good.
Well,
why is it good?
You actually hear that from Biden nowadays.
Right. Why is inflation good?
Because it's an indicator of economic activity, and there's buying and selling.
You're close. It forces you to spend.
Yeah.
It stimulates the economy, which is the most ridiculous thing in the world because human beings do not need stimulation to spend. So that was what we were told, and even the great economists like Milton Friedman, the really great economists, never really dealt. I've read all his books. They never really dealt with the inflation. They kind of, I guess they didn't dream how bad it would get. They didn't see that large part of the spiral. They just said, accept it as a phenomenon.
So that's actually the question I have, because I'm not an economist. I understand a lot of principles, but when you tell me that the inflation is going to hit trillions of dollars, I mean, not the inflation. I'm sorry. The what do you call it? The
money printing. The money
printing.
supply.
Money supply.
It's called M2. Yeah. Okay.
So when that happens, what does that mean? The debt is going to keep increasing, right?
Oh, for sure.
So what?
So we have to discuss. We have to discuss the debt-based system today. How is money created? By somebody taking out debt. That's how it is. When the government now prints money to fund something,
now a lot of the printing goes towards servicing that debt.
No, I mean to say when they do it, they have to issue the treasury notes for it. They can't just print it. Mm-hmm. They have to issue treasury notes, which is debt to the future. That if you hold this and redeem it in many years, it'll have a small interest rate on top of it. That's what everything is bonds and notes.
How long could they get away with this? What happens at some point? It's like a guy that says, I don't know. If I'll give you an example. Someone told me once. He said, sometimes if you drink at night, you have a couple drinks, alcohol.
I made a bracha before the podcast.
Okay, very good.
So
blessing for those that don't know what bracha is.
Yeah, us Orthodox Jews make a blessing before we consume any food or drink. But in one sitting, you don't have to keep making a blessing for every sip.
Very good.
So basically the blessing is, blessed are you, master of the universe, that depending on what the food is, if it's bread, it's that you have created the concept of bread or fruits, and for water, it's that everything happened at your will. So thank you, God.
Very good. See, this podcast is not meant to inspire people specifically, but just by this little point of clarification, you have just changed lives.
I hope so.
Very good. So back to this. So in some of the analogies someone gave me, it's like if you go out drinking with your friends, and then you get a hangover the next day. It's
almost
like
alcohol.
Alcohol, yeah.
Okay.
It's like you have a couple of drinks, you have extra more fun that day, and the next day you're kind of stealing the fun from the following day.
Right.
So I feel like in a way this is kind of analogous where okay, so we are able to service things, we're able to print more money now for the activity we wanted, and we're kind of stealing from ourselves in the future, right? Or maybe from our children or whatever it is. So the question is how far could that go? Because if it is exponential, I'm not, I don't fully understand economically what that impact looks like, and where does this bubble pop, because just like all of them they do, maybe it's not clear still to the rest of the world, and to Americans, I guess. But where is this going?
I have not heard an answer. I have not heard somebody who can explain how we get through the next 12 years.
Right.
I've tried. I
Is
mean,
that stealing money from? Is that taking money from our kids?
well, for sure. Everyone knows the whole Social Security makes no sense. Why are people retiring today at age 65?
When our president is 80.
when, when he's running again at age, he'll be 82 when he runs, and 86 if he wins and leaves the second term.
Right.
When Social Security was introduced, the retiring age, the life expectancy in the United States was under 60, and they said at 65 you can retire.
Right.
Today, nobody should be retiring at age 65.
Retirement is a separate.
I'm just bringing out how
yeah.
that whole system is broken. There's no way we'll be able. We can't even get by with our balance sheets. The unfunded liabilities of Medicare and Obamacare and Social Security has no way of surviving. That makes the debt spiral even greater. But I want to give you a defense for those economists who didn't push back and talk about inflation in the early days.
Please do tell.
Okay, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you my best theory. They felt that the economy was growing so much that it didn't matter as much, which means that if, let's say, the inflation happened in those days, that the supply of money doubled itself every 50 years, they felt that the economy doubled itself every 10 years, let's say. So, yeah, you're robbing people a little bit, but at the same time,
we're moving in the right direction.
We're moving in the right
so
direction,
fast that it doesn't.
And they made up all kinds of excuses. So that would be the only way I would understand it. Now, I would understand it. Now, you have to realize, if you take out any printing, this is a mind-blowing exercise. I'm just going to use numbers that are not accurate because I don't want to take out a calculator. But, it's okay. You don't have to find one on your computer. But if, let's say, there were a high number, $5 billion in circulation in the year 1910, I think that's actually what the number is, something roughly about that. I think that reflects having 10 tons of gold. But it's 20th of an ounce, so it was issued 1-to-1. You're only able to issue $20 for every ounce of gold.
Okay.
So you do the math of how many ounces there are in a pound, and therefore in a ton. So 10 tons of gold gives you roughly about, I think, $5 to $6 billion in circulation.
So let's say that's the case, yeah.
Okay. And they would have stayed on the gold standard. And obviously, they would have mined more gold every year. The supply of gold around the world goes up by some percentage. It was usually
1 or 2% now, but back then it was more.
No, it was under 2%. We have much better technology today. Yeah. It was never. I think the best.
We've depleted some of it though. But
the best median was 1.7. But so think about the next 100 years, adding.
Let's say 2% to be conservative
per year. So we would have doubled the supply of gold, slightly more than doubled it over the next 100 years. So there should be $10 billion in circulation. Okay, let's say we stayed on the gold standard. And now think of the purchasing power of a dollar today. The economy since 1910 has grown. Has doubled itself at least 10 times. I'd say, no, probably 20 times. I mean, we had certain major breakthroughs in technology have been incredible. The computing power of how everything has gotten cheaper, and also the trade with the rest of the world and the discovering silicon in the last 25, 30 years. And certain things that made it possible, aviation, like think of what happened think of the internet. 4G and 5G and fiber optics. Think of the last.
They say the world changed more in the last 50 years than it had in the previous 5,000 years.
Right. There was a very important change in the 19th century as well, when we got the telegraph, the camera, the Industrial Revolution, the conveyor belt,
right.
Steel, those few items, and where suddenly we joined the world globally. You had the transatlantic cable that a message can cross the Atlantic in the 1870s in 10 seconds as opposed to 10 days
right.
by messenger ship. That was huge. That allowed the countries to trade properly. So that's been a pretty big change. But yes, the last 20 years has been the greatest change, just people's attention spans, where people can't just sit and be.
I think the societies maybe changed on a
Right.
global scale, but last 20 years individually, everyone has just
Right.
been so affected.
When I was recently speaking to a group of 18-year-olds, and I was talking to them about you can only have a growth moment when you're bored, right? Meaning you're sitting, there's that moment where you say, okay, I better start spending more time with my wife or children, or, I better start dieting. I better take care of myself. I better stop.
They didn't know what you were talking about.
I better stop smoking. A reflective moment when you're bored. And I said, And I was explaining what boredom, not like the kind of boredom where you're
Were you
like,
tired of scrolling?
right, where you're tired, like, boredom as in like you're sitting in a doctor's office, you're sitting on a train, and you're sitting on a plane, and you're just reflecting. You're driving, and you have nothing on. You're just thinking. That kind of boredom. Or you're in the synagogue.
Lack of
You're in the
stimulus.
synagogue and they're reading from the Torah portion, right? And you're bored. Now you can
Not that one should be, just to
right,
clarify.
but you can connect with yourself.
Yeah.
You can connect, right? So one of them said,
It's like lack.
so one of
lack
them
stimuli.
did this. Watch what he did. He did. No, I've never been bored in my life.
That's kind of scary.
And I realized there's no way for him. He grew up. He had a smartphone from when he was 12 years old. Before that, he had these games, the tablets, whatever it was.
Yeah, but also
from a secular background, he
then
said he's never been bored.
screens and everything everywhere. It's just
Right.
constantly distracting.
So I'm saying a society that has a concept where you have an 18-year-old who is never bored, I think that's a much larger change than any other time in history. Because that's not just like, okay, now we have cars, now we have planes, now we have the telegraph, now we have the recording devices.
Right.
That is a fundamental change to the very fabric of a human soul,
Right.
of an emotional zone of a human being that has to exist. And I would say that it's not even close.
I agree.
It's not
I
even
think
close.
that I don't want to go in this tangent too much,
Right.
so I'm just gonna make one comment in this, and we'll try to find our way back.
Oh, we're gonna. This isn't all this, by the way, for our listeners. This is in our dopamine episodes, understanding the human currency, the hormone / molecule known as dopamine. I talk about it a lot. Some people even named me Yoeli dopamine. Remember? Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Okay, so let's find our way back now. We were talking about the war, and we were talking about
Why the people, the asset class, were willing to print because they get hold of it and they were able to further their agenda. Why the economists didn't notice the problem because
Very
we're doing the exercise, the purchasing power of a dollar.
yeah, do tell.
Okay, so it's an exercise that we're not used to doing, again, because we grew up in a world that everything is always being diluted. And most people say that's life. Things become more expensive over time.
Yeah, we were
right?
everyone accepted it basically.
Now, when you point out to them that in our lifetimes, the laptop computer, when I was a kid, was over $10,000, the cheapest one from IBM or eventually from Apple. And as it became more efficient and they mass produced them, they came all the way down. I remember when laptops were below 1,000. Today you can get a semi-decent brand new one for like $200 on Amazon.
right, and it's gonna be like 100 times more powerful what you would have bought for
Than the
$10,000
one, right.
10 years ago.
So things are supposed to come down in price.
Right.
As machines were being built and bakers were able to become more efficient
Right.
and hire less people, the price of bread came down.
So give me that exercise. Let's hear.
So one more example that everyone knows, like laser surgery. Like it started when laser surgery started 20 years ago, to LASIK, to fix the eyes. It was like, I think the beginning was 40,000, but it went to like 20,000 an eye.
Now you get like 3,000 per eye or something.
1,400 per eye.
Oh wow.
Competitive marketplace. So that's just to show you that prices do go down. But the reason why housing prices went up is, remember we said, when people print the money, they put it into the marketplace.
Right.
And the value of the dollar went down. So it's all artificial. The same building that changes hands, we're not talking about a neighborhood that built up that was like used to be farmland and now it's a city. But if you go to city Manhattan, find the building in the financial district, you look up the amount that it was sold in the year 1910, look up how much a loaf of bread sold for in 1910, divide it, you'll get a very similar number to the amount that building, like let's say it sold for $100,000 back then at 7 cents a loaf of bread, and now it changed hands for $40 million at $2.99 a loaf of bread. I don't know if my math is checking out right now. I just made up numbers, but you will find I have done the exercise and actually attached it to fixed commodities. And it shows you that building did not go up in value even one drop over the last 110 years.
It's just that the
dollar went down in value.
Right.
And now the same amount of loaves of bread buys the building today than the amount of loaves of bread bought the building then. So the people who print the money, the asset class, they have much more money than they had back then.
Right.
Like Rockefeller was insanely wealthy, and his wealth was in the millions, not in the billions.
I just saw an image, by the way, that really demonstrates this on a very basic level. I guess it speaks to the general value of investing your money,
Right.
which I guess is a part of this conversation as well. But the picture had basically shown the S&P 500 in the last 10 years, going that if you, let's say, put in $10,000 in S&P 500 10 years ago, right now that value would be 9 times more or so. It was
No, not 10 years. You're talking about 50 years. The S&P, which gave an average of 10% return, 10% compounded return doubles itself every 7 years, roughly.
Okay, so I forget the exact number.
So 50 years ago gives you 7x return. So $10,000 becomes $10,000 doubles itself every 7 years. So if you take out a calculator.
Okay, so
No, but you realize what I'm saying? Doubles every 7 years.
I don't remember the exact time frame, but it's not gonna matter because.
But it's in the millions.
I understand.
10,000 is in the millions because if you double something 7 times, here. Do you have a calculator on your computer?
Sure.
Do it.
Let's do it. Tell me, what am I doing?
You're taking the number 10,000.
Yeah.
And multiplying it by 2.
7 times.
So, yeah. So just do.
And that's every how many years?
Every 7. If it gives you a 10% return yearly average, it's never exact. 1 year it's down, but 1 year it's up 30%. Average of 10%.
7 times is
2.
640,000.
640,000. Just
That's 10 grand.
$10,000
Over what? That's
over 50 years. Put into the S&P. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So the example I was going to speak of is a shorter period of time. I forget what the exact time was, but at the time, the amount of time that it took for your investment to go up by 900 or 800 something, approximately 900%. So basically, almost 10x it, your investment. The same exact amount of value being stored in dollar went down like 50% or something like that. So what does that mean? That's just kind of like.
So that's the exercise we're in the middle of doing. If they would have not gone off the gold standard, the beginning of the fractional reserve banking in 1914 in the United States, and everything would need to be backed by gold. The purchasing power, you're gonna have to take out now a calculator, and we're gonna take GDP. Okay, but we're gonna have to get a few interesting numbers. Let's assume there would be 20 tons of gold in the United States' coffers.
Yeah.
Okay, so do 20 times 2,000.
Yeah.
Times 16, because we're trying to get ounces.
Okay.
Okay.
640,000.
That's how many ounces there are.
Times 16.
We skipped the step.
Okay.
We're talking about tons. Start over. Do 10,000. Do 20,000 tons. 20,000 times 2,000. I think you skipped the 2,000.
Yeah, you told me 20. But okay,
sorry. Times 2,000, which is 2,000 pounds to a ton.
Yeah.
Times 16.
Okay.
What's the number you got?
That was a lot of zeros.
Right.
It's
but now
640 million.
Okay. Now you're going to divide that by. Now it might be billion. You're going to divide that now by. You're going to divide that now by 20. Because there was 20 ounces to a dollar.
Yeah, we got.
Sorry, you're going to multiply that by 20. Yeah, I'm so sorry. You're going to multiply that by 20.
Tell me what the point is.
We're getting there. We're getting there. I'm showing you the number. I'm showing you the number in dollars that we have in circulation. Then we're going to divide that by GDP in today's value, and you're going to get the number of spending power per dollar.
Okay, so we have 12 billion, 800, 12 trillion, 800 billion.
Okay. No, that is, that's thousand.
Million.
12 billion. Yeah. Okay.
Close to 13 billion. Yeah.
We're going to have $13 billion in circulation today. Okay, so now let's talk about the real GDP of the United States. Roughly this year is $80 trillion.
Okay.
So now you're gonna take 80 trillion. Start over. It's very hard to do the year. They might not let you do it with the zeros.
Yeah, I think that.
And you're gonna divide that by 13 billion, and that's gonna be the spending power of a dollar in today's value. Okay, anybody could do this at home. These are obviously we're not using real numbers. Who thinks? I mean, I'm sure the United States would have a lot more than 20 tons of gold, because
6.15.
Let's see. No, did you? I don't think you did enough zeros.
Okay, so what is it? Where are we supposed to land? Just tell us.
So if you're, we're working this out. So the relationship between trillion to billion is a factor of 1,000.
Right.
So just do 80 million.
Yeah.
Divided by 13,000, and you'll get it. So 80 million is easy. Okay. Wait, are you sure you got 80 million?
Yeah.
Yes. Now divide that by 13,000. Equals 6,153. $1 in your pocket. If we would not have gone off the gold standard because of the economy rose so much to where we are today.
Right.
$1 would have the purchasing power. Not only would it have not gone down in value.
Right.
It would have gone up, just like a person took out a gold ruble. A gold ruble in Russia. Let's go with a gold coin, a German mark. In the year 1880, he took it from under his mattress, where it has been for 60 years, from 1820, before all the economy exploded into such growth that we had during that century. That gold coin went up in purchasing power, similar in only 60 years multiplied itself by 100.
I hear that. I would say that someone's going to have an argument here is that to say that from a purely mathematical standpoint, you're correct.
Yeah.
But they could also justify and say, you know, government had to operate and why are they printing more money? Is because they come up with more ways that they have to enhance the operation of the country.
So
And I'm
convince
not,
us,
and,
so tax us, convince us that it's important, and we'll pay in.
okay, as opposed to just making a decision, be like, okay,
We'd
you
all be
guys,
very rich if everyone's holding a dollar that the purchasing power keeps going up. We'd be the rich. We would have been the richest country in the world anyway.
correct.
Just
Okay, so now just to take this concept, and I think it's a pretty clear conclusion.
I think that the most important part of this thing is the rich people today would be exactly the same. That they would have been exactly the same. The only difference is the poor person can get himself out of poverty.
Because they could actually earn money.
They
that
could
they're
have
gonna
earn money that
store
will
and-
appreciate in value.
Yeah,
Because if you go to a poor person and say, start investing, he's like, what investing? I scrimp, I save, I put some money on the side.
right.
But that's being devalued. So we would be exactly the same wealthy. All I did was took 80 trillion, which is our GDP, and I multiplied it by a smaller denomination of dollars. So we'd be the same wealthy country, but it would be much less diverse. The people at the bottom would be able to get themselves out of poverty.
Right.
You would have a system where young people,
As long as
18-year-olds
they
are the
save
one.
and they think it,
Yeah.
and that's how it's used.
Where every
it used to
person in
be.
his lifetime, when you're 18, you're working a simple job in a hotel and you're pushing a cart and you're changing the bed
And
sheets.
eventually you'll buy a house.
And eventually you have enough money to start a business. And there's new 18-year-olds that are working the lower end job, but everyone can get themselves out of poverty.
Right.
So this, what they call the silent tax of inflation, is what robbed the people at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder from ever being able to get out of poverty.
Right. And it continues to happen right now.
Right. So that's why, and the proof of the concept is, the reason why Bitcoin is so successful right now is not here in the United States. In the United States, most people use it as a speculative tool, just like gambling. They don't know crypto, this, Ethereum,
Throw a little money at it.
Cardano, Solana, like I did in 2015. But the people of, if you read up what's going on around the world, El Salvador is the first country that that adopted it as legal tender. El Salvador in general did something incredible. They went from the highest crime rate country in both all the Americas, South America, Central and North America, obviously, from any area, the highest to the safest of, besides for the United States. There are some, we're one country, but El Salvador, actually Salvador's crime rate is lower than the United States is now. They are the safest state in the Americas.
Why is that?
They adopted Bitcoin. They gave people, they no more of that crappy life where you can't actually, well, there was a few things. The
new government.
The new government there threw all the gang members in prison, and
Fine.
they loosened gun restrictions terribly, and
So I want to understand how Bitcoin specifically was able to help that.
okay.
Because
So do we have time for that in this episode? How long
yeah.
is this episode going to run?
Okay, so I would say let's give it another few minutes. Next time we have a lot of very exciting stuff to talk about. We're going
Right.
to talk about gold, and because right now we've been really, besides all the tangents, the framework was talking about how Bitcoin is a better form of money.
Right, but we
And-
really didn't talk about Bitcoin much yet. You realize that? We talked about it very
Yeah,
little.
this was a history lesson, but it's gonna be
Right.
more about that, and we're gonna also give you, our listeners, very very good practical advice, because in no way was this an encouragement for everyone to go and buy Bitcoin immediately. This is more about gaining understanding that's gonna allow you to decide for yourself how much, if at all, you would like to allocate towards that,
Right.
because this is where the future is, and we're gonna discuss that a lot more.
Right.
There's a lot of history here. I do want to finish at least on the point where we would have a better understanding of how something like adopting Bitcoin had made such an impact on El Salvador and how it helped their people.
Egypt this last few weeks,
Right, sure.
they had a 100% inflation.
Turkey also.
Yeah, I'm saying Nigeria, it's been saving the villagers who are storing all their wealth in Bitcoin. One of the things I like to do most is to literally sit at a computer screen and just analyze wallets and see how they're being formed, watching the transactions of 0.0000005, and you see the frequency of the transactions. These are the poor countries. There's 50 million such wallets right now of the poor country, people in the poor countries, like in Africa
They're
and
storing
India,
their value.
storing all their wealth in Bitcoin.
Because they understand the Bitcoin.
And if you come to them and say, "Oh, buy my Solana coin," they'll be like, "These are technologies, pump and dump schemes." This is right.
Nobody's going to take those risks.
No.
There's another subject that I would love to discuss next time, and I'm going to definitely bring that up, and that is the ETFs. And just to kind of throw it in is the events that kind of took place in the last couple of weeks
Since January 10th
that have made
of this
a
year,
massive
2024.
impact on why we see the price of Bitcoin going up. And not only that, it just made the whole Bitcoin currency, essentially concept, as a way more available to
And legitimate Wall Street, they call it an investment,
right.
but they don't get it yet fully like we do, that it's just money.
So that's another that's going to be for another time.
Right. Do we have time to talk about just the how Bitcoin was formed? It's just the overall layout of it, the history of it.
Right. You know what?
The
I think in
cryptography?
this episode, we'll try to do to pack as much history lessons as possible, and next time we're going to focus on advice on helping people understand practical aspects of it and how to.
And
how
hopefully
to,
we'll get questions, a lot of questions from, if this goes out.
from all 4 people that are going to watch this.
Well, 40 you said, right?
Oh, okay.
All
Well,
40
that was
people.
optimistic.
Right. So let's
Let's pack the history in this one, and then we'll move on with the with the rest of them.
So what is Bitcoin? So before we get to Bitcoin, before we get to the actual Bitcoin, there were quite a few predecessors to Bitcoin. Many people know there's a lot of very interesting documentaries in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. So one of them was called, the most famous one was called B-Money, which Bitcoin even references that it's trying to make a better version of B-Money, where there were very, very, a lot of energy and money and time and resources went into creating a monetary system that's not inflationary. That this was the predecessor to the cypherpunk movement. There was, I forgot the name, what they called themselves. The people like, this is in the 1980s.
That was like, those people were all super libertarians.
Yes,
that were
yes.
like,
It was a pushback to the hippies. It was like the hippies in the 60s. There was a lot of...
technology was
to
not
us,
there
it's
yet,
like,
though.
it's already 40 years ago. You know, I was born in the very early 1980s, 1982 to be precise. So, so I don't, I didn't witness it firsthand, but I did read a lot about it. So they ran into a lot of very technical issues.
Meaning, at that era, they were just, the
Yeah,
world
but they
was
were
not ready for it.
trying to make a monetary system, and these were a lot of smart people, and nobody was saying like, "But what is it? Could I hold it?" No, they were trying to make a digital money.
Interesting.
They were trying to create Bitcoin.
So what happened in 2008?
So in 2008, this Satoshi Nakamoto, which I don't think it's a group of people. I think it's one person, and he's either paralyzed
Or dead.
or dead.
Or forgot the keys to his
Or
wallet.
he forgot the keys to his wallet.
Which is the worst.
Right, because he hasn't. He worked with. He was a cryptographer. There's a lot of investigations based on his time zone. Either seems like he was on the United States time zone, but it could be that he was just a night owl.
But a lot of people also say that because of the concept of Bitcoin is solving the problems of overprinting money.
Right.
That and in 2008 there was the housing
bubble. No, he
That-
wrote. He
exactly,
wrote it
in his emails. He talks about
in
it
his
as
email,
well.
he talks about that's why he sat down to do Bitcoin.
The whole premise, just so that our listeners and viewers understand, the whole premise of Bitcoin is basically to create something that's not going to allow the government
to do what they did.
Correct.
What they did in 2008.
Correctly, and to create a kind of what's known as the decentralized system that will not allow a control to any.
No
human
one person
being.
has access to the printer. That was the concept.
Correct.
So since money is how people store their economic activity, we're going to find another way to store our economic activity outside of the U.S. dollar.
So tell us what Satoshi did.
So outside of the U.S. dollar. So he was very upset about the bank bailouts. Now you have to realize the bank bailouts were a very, very big deal. That just goes to show you like the inefficiencies and the evils of government.
Right.
Because the way money works is if you take a risk, you're supposed to absorb that risk.
Yeah, there's consequences.
But then whenever you involve government, so everything falls away. When government says, like, for example, today, let's say minimum wage. So the concept is a person's supposed to start off getting paid below minimum wage until he can show he's worth minimum wage, right?
Well, it also puts the burden on the employers because I'm also a citizen. You know, if I'm hiring someone.
Because they made a law. So now minimum wage is just artificially pushing up the price of labor, and you end up hurting the person you were trying to help. That's another discussion. Whenever government tries to help, they hurt. Because they were trying to help the black teenagers in the 1950s when they had the minimum wage, but instead the black teenagers all got hired to be the ushers with the flashlights at the movie theaters, and they had all these part-time jobs. And the minute that minimum wage was enforced, Thomas Sowell writes in his books. He was, Thomas Sowell was a black young adult in that era.
Is a genius economist.
Right. He all those jobs went away. Not only did people say, "Listen, I can afford to hire." People were racist, let's say. I can afford to hire a white person for this because it's minimum wage. but it was no longer worth it to keep those jobs. So all those
It
entry,
actually caused unemployment.
it caused the unemployment went up.
Right.
So that's another discussion. And whenever you try to control something that you can't control, all you do is damage something unforeseen.
Right, you keep things off balance.
Right.
So what
You lock down millions of people around the world, for example. You didn't stop the virus because everyone was going to the supermarkets. You would have given them a chance not to catch it from each other, but you closed down all the aisles where they could have bought like gardening and fishing equipment, and you didn't let them do that. So you kept them only in the food aisles so everyone can give each other COVID. So, okay, so you didn't help, but you harmed. Drug overdoses went up exponentially in those 2 years.
Right.
And like we mentioned, in tuberculosis, tens of thousands of healthy adults died of tuberculosis.
This tends to happen also with, let's say, with affirmative action. There's a lot of studies right now coming out and saying that.
Bring it on. Anything government does.
I just want to finish that point on that. So that a lot of times the teens that end up getting into really good schools because they had that extra boost coming from the government, because they had to match certain statistics. A lot of these teens actually really struggle in college because the standard of them getting in had been lowered, so they came up from a bigger pool. But then once they're actually in school and they're trying to do their best, they should have never made it into that school, not because it discriminates, because maybe that particular individual was not necessarily studious enough, and then they're competing with all these
or fit for that school.
Correct. So there's a natural way in which the world is running that I think people should
the marketplace
allow exactly in terms of skills.
And
sets
the marketplace
and
always produced the best money available. If you were on a certain island, it was seashells. In prison, it's been
not just money, outcome in general for everyone.
Right, but I was coming back to talk about money.
All right.
How it connects. In prison, it was always cigarettes
as a currency.
Right. Because you couldn't make anything else. And then we had, at times in history, it was copper. Copper worked because it was scarce enough. They didn't have the technology to dig it out of the ground in large amounts. So, and then eventually silver and eventually gold. But whenever these groups, whenever copper, silver, and gold met each other, what they called it the monetary principle of one. One always wins. Now, there's a reason for that. They can't coincide.
Right.
Because whenever another one tries to resist, and you say, okay, in this ecosystem, silver will also be money.
Right.
But it can't, because if you could spend all your gold mining silver, you could flood that market with silver. Copper, we all understand, because copper is so easy.
Abundant.
You can double, with today's technology, you can double the supply of copper in the entire world if everyone wanted to in 1 month.
Right.
If everyone just mined a lot and put all resources. All the gold miners switched. So if you decide to make copper's money, let's say the whole world agreed copper's money, it would fail within 3 months. A complete failure, and then you would have chaos. Because the entire world was, all the copper miners, gold miners, and silver miners, platinum, anybody with mining equipment would just focus all of his energy
on copper.
On mining copper.
And then
suddenly you have a large amount, it crashes the price.
Correct.
And then you'd have warehouses with thousands of tons of copper rusting, because copper rusts and it doesn't last forever. So that's the idea. But what's the exception? How can you, get an ecosystem to trade in copper? You make a law that if you trade in anything other than copper, we'll shoot you. But then you're going to have a whole bunch of people trying to mine copper. Then the government has to make more laws that nobody else can mine copper but us.
Right, and then becomes a slippery slope. And
So
that has happened with a lot of things.
Right, that's exactly fiat. So then it's exactly like the dollar, but only the government, the ones with the guns, who tell you have to pay your taxes in copper.
Monopoly and violence.
And right. There can't be a monopoly without violence. People talk about monopolies. You show me a monopoly in history, I don't care what it is.
That came organically,
that came in the marketplace, I'll show you that it did not. It can't be. Show me a monopoly today that exists in the world. Me and you, let's go break into that market and just
take over.
And take over market share. We can't, because there's the best example was the radio and broadcasting licenses in the early part of the century, in the 20th century. There was only a few slots given out, and it was given by the government. There was this office, and then it was split into the states. Right. But you couldn't just open up your own.
Or it could be illegal, because if you tried broadcasting a certain wave, that's not yours.
Right. Think of the railroad. There were government subsidies. It was always government that helped.
Okay.
And people say, but Amazon is terrified of Walmart, terrified of Target. They're always they are terrified.
They want to be one step ahead.
Right. But if Walmart just made a slightly better app, first of all, if they're a monopoly, they're not really a monopoly. Look how cheap everything is on Amazon. Monopolies have everything being very expensive. They're terrified of losing market share.
Well, they don't have control. Amazon is just extremely efficient. And right? It's not. And not only that, the monopoly is a complicated one also, because there's specific areas in which you might be a monopoly, but you're not in others. There's not absolute monopolies really in anything right now. The only thing I think right now is maybe some kind of technological solution where you know something that others don't, or you figured something else that the others don't. But I can't think of a specific example right now.
Okay, so overall, talking about how the money always leads to one. So what happens is in each ecosystem, the reason how let's a thought exercise. How did cigarettes become money in prison? A big prison used to have
Because they're scarce. Because
somebody. But I'm sure
interchangeable.
they tried other things, but each thing they tried, there was a problem with it, because the first simple solution is to find find toilet paper and create squares.
But then everyone's gonna get more of those. So
And people are going to start finding alternative ways to clean themselves and just turn toilet paper into money.
Yeah.
So what the idea was when they settled on cigarettes, when they realized that but there's no decree. Nobody decreed.
correct.
Humans.
All these things happen
It's
organically.
a natural occurrence. Exactly.
Okay.
So humans would never choose fiat currency, but humans now found a way. So let's go back to the Bitcoin. What he said, what he realized is that.
But he means Satoshi Nakamoto.
Satoshi Nakamoto, that the banks just bailed the banks. There was a housing bubble. How did that housing bubble happen? Keep it really short, because thousands of videos were made on this topic of the housing crisis, the housing bubble of 2008. But what happened is that the government, there were laws about that the banks had to give certain loans. They were trying to undo something called redlining for lower income people that lived in certain neighborhoods. So you had bankers saying, "How can I give a loan to this person? We're afraid he's not good for it. His income's not good enough. Whatever it was, he was a felon. We're not going to approve him for a loan." And what the feds basically said was, "We'll back you," which is what happened. So once you tell that to bankers, no problem, free money. So they printed loans to oblivion. And then when that happens, the housing prices go up, because nobody knows what the price of a house is. The only way you know it is how much you have to put down and how much you have to pay a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody came and said you can only buy this house, if somebody came, a Borough Park house that right now is on the market for $3 million, and mortgages disappeared and you have to buy it in cash, they wouldn't be $3 million.
Right.
Immediately it would correct itself to a number much closer to $1 million. But property was always tied to the interest rates, always tied to how much do I have to put down so I can get a mortgage.
Right.
So when the mortgages are easier to get, so even lower people of the socioeconomic ladder can now approve for those mortgages, automatically the prices go up.
Right.
Because that person knows he comes and really it's not in his budget, but he can get funded. So that's what happens. So this we call a bubble.
The housing.
And obviously the bankers, what they called it, bundled securities, where they would sell it. They wouldn't hold those notes for long. They would bundle together many houses in many neighborhoods, to say it in a very simple way, and they would sell it to these third parties that buy bundled securities. And it was a big cockamamie mess. But when the whole thing started collapsing, when people started defaulting, and then it was a trigger effect, that's how you had the entire collapse. And the banks would have all gone out of business. But the bankers then turned to the big brother, the government, and said, "You made us do these risky loans. So you promised us
That you're gonna back us.
that you'll back us." And they did. And that's when they bailed them out. And by the way, if you read the numbers of the bailouts back then, they were in the billions, not in the trillions, because this is in 2008. And the spiral that we talked
But
about,
a lot of people suffered.
the spiral was still getting bigger, but it was here. Yes, it was very difficult. So he was so upset. He wrote extensively how upset he was about the bailouts. And he realized that nothing can stop the rich from getting richer, because they were not affected. The poor people lost their houses, and the rich lost nothing. All the people who bought those bundled securities were the rich asset class. They lost nothing. The people at the bottom lost their homes, and the people who were exposed to small amounts of investings because all those so many real estate trusts went bankrupt and crashed. There was a lot of blood in the streets for the average person, which is the middle and lower. The upper middle class were kind of affected, obviously somewhat, but the real upper class was not. Obviously, they fetched a little bit because things changed when the economy slows down. Everyone's affected, but their wealth wasn't hurt, and it was a short blip in their lifetime of wealth. So that's when he started working on it, and he solved, with everything that he did, he solved the most important problem, cryptographic, the double spend problem. And he came up with this genius idea, and has so many amazing components.
Is it fair to say that the most valuable aspect of it was the fact that everything in the digital world today is kind of replicatable? Just like your example when you spoke about the MP3 file, like someone creates a music file, you could copy it and you could do this infinite number of times and everything is a copy. But with Bitcoin, he was able to create a system that is limited to 21 million
Yeah,
pieces
I would say that's.
that are fully divisible, but and
I thi-
despite being digital, which makes it the easiest way of transfer and all the benefits that come with the digital, he was able to um, create a secure system that's not that can't be changed, is on following a certain schedule. There's a schedule coming up right now. In about a month from now, there's an event called Halving, which
we'll talk about. Oh yeah,
will,
we're gonna get to that in a moment because we're gonna start from the beginning of what he did and how he did it.
or might save that for next time.
Right. Well, we're about to talk about it because we're talking about the
Fine.
first few years.
So let's
So
I would throw in, let's do another few minutes talking about the history. Try to pack that in, and I want to try to
let's just jump in and right now just describe what he did.
Let's go.
Okay. So he started a software program which he shared with all other cryptographers, and he said, "I'm going to mimic gold." And he started from like the drawing board. If I wanted to make the perfect money, what problems would I run into? And each time he found the problem, or somebody suggested a problem, he found a way to fix it. That's what he did. He created the perfect money system. This is one of the greatest miracles in human history, that a person would do that and give it over, not retain any backdoor of control, and disappear. He wrote an email in
the
2000.
disappearing part. We don't know if it was
No,
intentional.
In 2010, he wrote, "So long, I have other things to attend to," and he was gone. That was it. He says, "I have other things to attend to." That was his final email, and he basically said goodbye to the world. And he basically in if you want to, I don't remember the exact wordings, in the to paraphrase, take care of my Bitcoin for me.
I understand, but I'm saying
care
that
of my invention.
we also don't know 100% what happened.
No, like I said, if I had to guess, of course he's dead. But but the fact, the odds of such a thing ever happening again is very important. It'd be like, oh, maybe the next Bitcoin, maybe some other cryptocurrency. No, any other thing is somebody telling you, don't look here, make me rich. I made a coin.
Every coin starts with someone going to a venture capital firm and saying, "Hey
raising
guys,"
a lot of money,
and so then that's how Ethereum started. And
all coins have people that say, "Trust me, Yeah, I use the same technology as Bitcoin." I love that.
I'm a better version. No, they say I'm a better version.
I'm a better version, right? We have lights and sirens, and we're faster and we're stronger.
And by the way, some of them are, in their defense, but there's one thing they will never have.
Money. They're not money.
Correct, but I'm saying that the decentralized, the truly decentralized aspect is only unique to Bitcoin, and that is because single one of them has a backdoor, has a server that it relies on,
right?
That has Ethereum is built on Amazon Web Services.
I know, AWS.
If the government doesn't like something about what Ethereum, it says we need to make more Ethereum. They go to Amazon and says we have a court order, we have some kind of general order that you have to do this, otherwise we're shutting it down.
But ask the person who made this coin. What's wrong with Bitcoin? Why should I use your coin? That's always the question.
Well, they will tell you. They will tell you.
Oh, mine's better.
No, they'll say Yoeli, but in their defense, they say that mine's more efficient. Mine is faster. Mine's able to solve problems.
Did they throw away the keys?
No, that's the only one. Correct. That's my point. I'm not defending them. I'm just saying that.
Okay.
In the end of the day, there will be different aspects of different coins that will be superior to Bitcoin, but that doesn't change the fact that the Bitcoin is the big daddy of all of them, in that it's the only one that's decentralized.
Truly decentralized.
Truly decentralized in a way that not even the U.S. government has figured out a way to control it, and they would kill for it. If they could.
The U.S. government holds, like you said, over 200,000 Bitcoin, and they get the same vote on the network. If we all have to make a security change, 51% of the network has to click enter at the same time. They get the same vote as a villager in El Salvador that's holding 0.00001 which is 100 Satoshis. That's it, which is worth a few pennies. Same vote. You're connected to the network. So it's truly decentralized. So let's see what he did. So he said, so he had to solve problems. If I create this thing, I have all of it. How do I give it out? And the true problem is, how do I create value around it in a way that it will spread itself out like gold over time, that it could be found, because gold is not found at once. All the gold we have today is an accumulation of 5,000 years of gold mining and discovery. So he started off so he created a computer program, a software, that fixed a certain amount in time, and it's a program that runs for the next, it's not defined in time, it's defined in blocks, in pages, but it's designed to have every 10 minutes a page, and every 216 pages, which is 2016, which is exactly 2 weeks, 14 days, there's something called a difficulty adjustment. And that means that if they're being mined too fast, well, he finds a way to slow it down. We'll discuss how it slows down. Or if it's mined too slow, it accelerates.
Right.
Okay, so that means he took the bitcoins, put them into time, started off with a large amount in the beginning, and then he started mining. So the way to mine is that you have a computer that has to guess a cryptographical puzzle. So because he was the only one mining when he started, the first coins he had a regular laptop computer, and the puzzles had to be very simple because a simple computer, so the number probably had 5-6 digits, because it needed to find it just randomly starts.
Had to guess it at
Has
random.
to guess it at random. So it just goes 00001, 00002, 0003, 0004. And then after 10 minutes, it found the number. Bleep, 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 bleep. You just mined the first bitcoins. Now, he was the only one. So it had to be an average of 10 minutes. It was very, very simple. So every 10 minutes, he received 50 bitcoins. But he knew that now it has no value. So he started distributing those bitcoins, sending them on this ledger, and he was confirming all the transactions himself, because he was the only miner. He was like the Adam Arishon, the first man of Bitcoin, the first man, Adam in the Garden of Eden, right? So he was all on his own. He had a few buddies, and they quickly joined him, and they were known to airdrop, and they sent it to all their buddies, and those are a big portion of those are the ones that are lost today. People didn't store them well. It was a new idea.
Someone bought a pizza for 10,000.
That was a few years later. That was in 2011.
Which is still hilarious.
10,000 bitcoins for one pizza. It was called Pizza Day, right? 10,000. Everyone says, people say nobody wants to be pizza man, right? To spend your bitcoins too early. But we needed that. We needed Pizza Man. That was the first transaction where Bitcoin transacted with value ever in history. And that was very important. 2 pies of pizza, regular Papa Joe's pizza, 10,000 bitcoins. So now he built something very smart in there. What he built in there was that after roughly 4 years, the reason why I say roughly is because there's a difficulty adjustment. So it's important to understand that as more people joined the network and started downloading the software, so because now there's 4 people on there, it has to get 4 times as hard. Because if 4 people are running computers, the computers are going to split up.
It should be 4 times faster.
They're going to split up their work, and the computers communicate with each other in the software and says, okay, we're assuming it's a 10-digit number. So you pick a 10-digit number means there's 100 million, there's 1 billion, 99,999,000, whatever that is. So you search for the first 250 million. You search for the next one. We're going to split it up. And then we reach the same 10 minutes. Till today, where the miners around the world are this crazy competition that they do, the difficulty adjustment is so important because, let me not get ahead of myself. 4 years later, when Bitcoin already had value, when it reaches that point at a certain amount of blocks, the supply gets cut in half. And then the supply goes from 50 to 25. Now, every 10 minutes, those miners
get 25
who solve the
Bitcoin
cryptographic puzzle,
reward.
they get rewarded, whichever one does it, 25 Bitcoins. And that went on for another 4 years. And mind you, is during this time, that if you look at Bitcoin's chart, there's these 4 major events. The time you hear about it in the news, like you're hearing about it now, is right before the halving. Usually it was right after the halving when everyone heard about it.
Halving is from
halving
the word
is
half.
where the supply, it's called the halving. Halving, Halving.
Yeah, something becomes half the size.
It gets cut in half. So after 4 years, it became 25. At that point, it already had some value. It was already 2 years after Pizza Day. And Bitcoin is trading between $20 and $90 at that time already. And after the halving is when it hit its $100 for the first time. And then 4 years later, when it was switched to 12 and a half
value
coins per mining, that's when right after that it hit $1,000 for its first time. And then we know in 2017, that was right. That was I'm losing track. There's 29, 13, and then 2017. Sorry, it hit 20,000. It already hit 20,000 after 2017. That was just after 2 major cycles. Right. Then after 2021 is when it.
That's when it really popped.
That's when it went to hit 65,000.
That's when everyone heard about Bitcoin.
No, everyone heard about it the first time also in 2017 as well.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Where was I?
Probably Moldova still. Oh, you were in Asia Torah.
2017.
No, you were in Borough Park.
Yeah.
Where
was I?
I don't know.
It's not too late, everybody. It's not too late.
It keeps going in waves. Right. That's every 4 years when the supply gets cut off. But the ironic part is that it takes a lot of money to mine. So he needed, I keep getting ahead of myself. So he needed it to be a proof of work. That people that are mining, don't forget, the people that are mining are the ones that are also verifying the transactions. They're rewarded that they get the transaction fees of all the transactions of that page. So the miners really get 2 things. The miners get rewarded the blocks of the reward, plus they get all the transaction fees for that block. And the next block, the next miner it could be the same miner who gets it twice in a row, but today the way it works is because there's so many miners, there are pools that people pool in their computing power, and whoever has more hash power, what they call it, gets a proportion of the reward according to the amount of computing power that he offers the network.
Right.
So if you look at the graph you go online, you see the graph of I think 22 mining pools altogether in the world. It's worth it for everyone to join up, because if everyone fragments themselves, the chances of them getting rewarded go down so much more. Where all the networks work together, and it's completely mathematically probable that you'll get a proportionate amount of computing power in rewards.
It's not a gambling, really. Yeah.
Right? No, it's not a random. It's fairly certain.
I get it.
That's just how it works. Just like if you roll a dice 100 times, you will find that eventually it evens itself out. That it's even proportion the amounts of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If it's an evenly weighted dice.
Right.
Dice is twice. Is the plural. So
I'm very glad you clarified that part.
Yes. So he solved an innumerable amount of problems. Firstly, he spread it out through time. Usually, you can rush and put more resources and mine more gold.
Right.
He's like,
No, every 10 minutes.
Every 10 minutes, there's going to be a block from now until 2140. And that's when the last tiny fragment of Bitcoin is mined.
Right.
And then from there on, the miners are still.
I'm going to make just a very basic comment, but I want people to understand that when we buy and sell Bitcoin, it's basically a marketplace. But we're not just buying the Bitcoins that are new that are being mined. There are people selling all the time, and there are people buying all the time.
Speculators.
So unless they're holding, this is kind of what's going through rotation.
Holders don't sell.
And what's going to happen now in 1 month from now is when this supply, today there's thousands of Bitcoins being traded every day.
Right. But the daily supply is
the daily new supply right now is 900 new Bitcoins a day.
Because after you split 12 and a half, which became in 2021 6.25, it's been 6.25 for the last 4 years. It's going to 3 1/8 on April 20.
425 Bitcoins a day.
Which is
425 a day.
450.
Oh, 450 a day.
Yes.
It's 450 a day. So that means that there's a massive chunk of supply that's gonna
be taken off the market.
Correct. And
4 years later, in 2028, it's going down to 225 per day.
Correct. And I mean, and
then in 2032, 112 and a half per day.
You get it.
You get it.
So the point is that it's the supply shock. I mean, I don't want to get into this so much and make you speculative kind of guesses.
Yes, don't try to time the market. I'll buy it this summer when it hits 150.
And we're going to get into
and then I'll buy it now, sell it then at 150, and then rebuy it at 90, which you try doing it. It's punished everybody who's tried timing the Bitcoin market.
What's important is that there's two main forces that are happening that I'm just going to mention now without details, because we could go into more details and that's why we are talking about Bitcoin now. There's a sense of urgency in a way. Urgency to understand, not necessarily to buy. But the one is, we know the economic principles is the supply and demand. When the demand increases and the supply were to stay the same,
usually supply increases when demand does. If suddenly we need more baby strollers.
In a system that allows for it, yeah. Bitcoin doesn't allow that.
Bitcoin's unique. Everything else in the economic system, if the demand goes up.
Correct. Oh, well, there is something called like inferior goods and necessities. Then if something's a necessity, let's say insulin, and then there's only a limited supply of insulin in the market.
That's because it's government regulated. Pick something that's not government regulated.
Okay. In a short period of time, in certain situations, there could be.
Because we can't make enough during that time.
Exactly.
That's called shortage.
So in that situation, the price of insulin flies high because it's very inelastic in its.
But long term, the market adjusts, and then many more people will start producing insulin.
Something called price elasticity. But when something is locked in, then with the supply here still kind of changes a little bit, because we do have the events of halving the supply. The supply is growing, but it's growing by less and less and less.
But if the whole world tomorrow, all 8 billion want Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, no.
That's a demand of a billion X.
But you're talking about the demand side.
Same.
You're talking about the demand side.
I'm trying to show you there's no relationship. In the marketplace, there's always a relationship.
There's two things happening right now that are increasing the price. One is the supply goes down. It's already going down, but it's already going down, but it's going down even further in 1 month from now. And the demand is going up, and that's stimulated by ETFs, which is a way that the baby boomers, the biggest investing class in America, has access
to Wall Street. It's on Wall Street.
Correct.
And the NASDAQ.
So both of those factors are tremendously impacting the price of Bitcoin. We see, like in the last month and a half, it had almost doubled because of those events, and based on predictions, which This is not investment advice. We take no responsibility for. However, every finance person, even people, the biggest anti-Bitcoin people,
Right.
now would agree that this thing's going to 100 and 150 in the summer, which is double from where it is at right now. So this is something just for people to keep in mind as they're going to continue listening to it.
I still don't. I still do not recommend that you buy Bitcoin now until you fully understand it, because let's say he's right. We know we have a crystal ball. It's going to 150 in the summer. I still wouldn't tell you to, because the pain that you're going to have along the way between now and then, it's going to drive you crazy, because you become a speculator and you check every day. Let's say you put in $100. And then tomorrow, I mean, over this weekend, it was in the early 70s before the weekend. Now today it was trading in the 60s, upper 60s, like 66.
69 now.
You could be what? Okay,
It's back
yeah,
up. It's a back up, baby.
okay, but you're gonna be like, you won't sleep at night. And then what if it decides to settle for like those sideways trading, like it did so many times in the last few years, where it's gonna settle in the 50s for a few weeks? You're gonna drive yourself crazy.
Right.
And then you're gonna sell it at a loss. Then you're gonna rebuy it when it hits 100 again. Oh, now I'm gonna chase it. And then when you sell it at 150, you get so frustrated that it flew all the way up to 200. Bitcoin's a long game. If you look at it, if Bitcoin does what it's supposed to do and take over if the entire world slowly switches over to put their economic activity in Bitcoin,
Right.
then it will swallow up everything.
Right.
Bitcoin will be worth hundreds, tens of millions of dollars, and eventually,
I agree with you 100%.
If it's going there, who cares if you buy it at, wait till 150, 70, it doesn't matter.
Well, I would say, look, we're talking to different kinds of people here.
Okay.
If someone has money in S&P right now, like I'm not talking about people who have some kind of investments and they just never gave Bitcoin a shot. They might have perceive it differently right now than people that never invested money in general ever.
Okay.
Right. So I would personally, my personal recommendation, it's not a financial advice, just the way I see it. I think that people that never invested, as they get more educated, should invest
$10.
little by little, exactly, or designate 1% of their monthly income towards this investment, and they're not gonna lose sleep at night if it goes down, because it is quite volatile still. It goes up and down, but at least they'll know that they're accumulating something every week, every month, whatever.
And now they have an interest and incentive to understand it because they have a few dollars in it.
They have skin in the game.
Okay.
Now, and I would say that people that already have other investments, obviously they should become educated as well. But I think that it's worthwhile them to consider moving a portion of their portfolio in Bitcoin, also maybe over time, maybe in certain sections. You wouldn't.
I agree, but I disagree with you. When I think they should only do it after they spent 20 hours.
Or whenever they're comfortable. Wouldn't that be like
I think 20 hours of researching and discussing, then put in the small amount.
Well, if we keep going, this podcast is going to be 20 hours of researching.
Okay, I think we can wrap it up. I think we kind of got through a little bit of the structure of Bitcoin, of how he structured it to become truly scarce.
We got through a lot of history. I think
it is not hackable. It is secure. That's something else that has to be talked about. Like, understand how it can be moved to a cold wallet. There's so much to understand.
It is also something
that can be sent anywhere in the world in a split second. Yes, what were you saying?
Whatever you people buy right now, I think the way you view it is like something that you don't want to touch for the next 4 years or so. Like we're talking about when we give recommendations here, or not recommendations, just our perspective and understanding of Bitcoin and how people should, if they've never heard of it and never dealt with this, should get involved. This is the type of thing that we want people to become educated on, but not necessarily like, we're not telling you to pump now because it's going to get 100 and that's when you should cash out. No. We're talking about a tool that could potentially, for a lot of people, help pay for their kids' weddings and pay for things that, because the dollar keeps getting weaker, as we spoke about this, and Bitcoin is gonna, every 4 years, if you compare the whole track record of Bitcoin, despite its volatility, it's been always one of the best investments that exist.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're coming from, and we're not here to tell you to just buy now because in a few months from now it's gonna be good to sell. It's gonna be buy now because in a few years from now, you're gonna be happy that at some point within this year you bought. You're
storing your value. That's all it is. Just to bring that home. People come up to me, friends that don't have time to discuss it, and I say, if you don't have time to discuss it, this is my recommendation for you.
Just do this exact thing.
How much do you make? Okay, you have 5 kids. Okay, whatever. So how much are you putting away a year? Okay, you have a life insurance policy. You have this. You have that. Okay, so you have like an extra like $30,000 a year to invest. I still say put in $100 a week, even to that person, $100 a week. That's it.
Right.
Because anything more, you'll accumulate $1,200, but it's not going. So but I might miss it. What if Bitcoin goes to 150? So It's either going to 1 million or it's going to zero. Bitcoin is not staying at 150.
Well, no, it's not going to zero.
No, it's not good. I'm saying it can either go to the infinite numbers or Bitcoin cannot be quasi-successful. Remember we said about the rule of money? Money goes one. In order for people to trade, money always wants to be one. The only reason why we have the dollar and the pound today is because the governments in England say you must use the pound, and over here we must use. But if not for that, when we were both on the gold standard, they were the same thing. There was no exchange rate. It was exactly divisible in ounces of gold. So countries need to trade with each other, and even across borders, money always is desperate to become one and meld itself into one. So Bitcoin will beat out gold for sure, because it was designed to be gold, but that much better. Now we just need to talk about jewelry, and before I think we can finish this thing.
Gold is going to be its own discussion,
right?
Next
But no, but this is the biggest fallacy you'll ever hear,
Yoeli.
and that is gold. That gold has value.
It's an itch.
Gold has value because you can make jewelry out of it. Okay, that is the equivalent of saying the reason why lamaisa dollar, in essence. See, I was told to translate any Hebrew word I use to its correct English form. So, in essence, that's a good one. Oh, in essence, a dollar is
Practically speaking.
The
is practically.
You can fold it up. You're sitting at a table at a restaurant. It's shaky, and you can then use the dollar to, use case, utility prop up the table that now it is no longer shaking. Nobody would say that is the primary utility of a dollar.
Correct.
That is exactly the relationship
Right.
that jewelry has with gold. In the way over 90% of all jewelry, of all gold in existence that ever lived has always been stored in gold form, in block form or coin form, in vaults.
Right.
And
Jewelry has other materials you can make it out of.
And to do another thought exercise, I want you to picture if at any point in history, including today, somebody discovers a material that is just as nice as gold, just as indestructible as gold, just as scratch-proof, just as you can like melt it down and meld it, meldable, all the properties of gold, the same strength. It's exactly the same thing, but there's an abundance of it, which means you can make it in a factory for cheap. That would not bring down the price of gold even one iota.
Because that's not what
gold is.
That's not
Everyone knows nobody's going to store their economic value in this new metal.
It's just people had this kind of tacit agreement with each other where they said we all believe in gold. So like the value of gold is the level of belief that's in it, and that's sometimes the argument people make about Bitcoin. They say if it's not backed by anything other than a piece of software, what else is it? It's like yeah, but gold is 99% that as well.
Right.
So but Bitcoin is better in other areas.
And then they'll always make the jewelry case, which has nothing to do with money.
Very good.
When we turn our economic time and energy into money, it's money, not into jewelry. Now you can make jewelry out of gold, yes, and you can make cups out of silver, and you can make rings out of platinum. But that's not how the value works. Yes. Are we wrapping this up?
I would like to.
Yes.
And here's how I'm going to do this.
All right.
Well, first of all, thank you. If you got this far,
yes.
This is huge because
we had a lot of fun.
This was a very enjoyable experience for us. We don't know how we did. Maybe let us know.
And I promise that I will be a little bit less excitable on other topics that I will allow for more, especially when we have guests. See, this is like, one of my best friends who I'm always interrupting anyway. And he told me be myself when I show up to this podcast.
That was my mistake.
Right, that was your mistake. I will hopefully be calmer and a little bit less excited. This has been something that's been very dear to me for the last few years.
Or not, because maybe people will leave comments saying, hey, maybe give us more Yoeli Doppelt.
All right.
Okay, so next episode you could expect to hear more about ETFs and know why.
Hopefully we'll off camera we'll try to narrow down how to organize the next one really well for you. We knew
but I want to get people excited for now. So you'll learn more practical tools of how to understand the investing side. And kind of really how to benefit and build wealth, hopefully for you and your family
and how
for
to
many
store
years
it.
ahead. Right. Well, that's a good idea as well. We'll speak about storage.
How not to pay taxes on it.
Well, that's legally, obviously, we're referring to.
No, I'm in full legal form. For example, I have a friend that just made a wedding, and he said, I'm going to sell a Bitcoin. I said, look into borrowing against it.
And yes,
he did. He borrowed against. He had to stake of. At that point, Bitcoin was at $30,000. He staked 5 of them. He got a $60,000 loan. During that time, he paid 8% interest until recently when he returned it. And Bitcoin, since holding on to that 30, those 5 Bitcoins that were staked at 30,000 value are now worth $69,000 in value. This is all in the span of 5 months. So he paid the interest, no taxes, has the Bitcoin back, And
Very good.
that's one idea. I'm just gonna give you an example.
We'll give you more ideas because we have done research on this. It's an important subject. We're going to talk about an argument people, among other arguments, about people making about Bitcoin going to zero, which right now it just surpassed silver in terms of its market cap. It's not going to zero, but we'll discuss this as well. And effective tools to basically make your life better with that. That's on the Bitcoin side, which we're going to have maybe one or two more episodes. But in general, from this podcast, we're excited to have interesting guests. So it's not going to be just us speaking. It's going to be us.
Sorry, guys, not just us.
We already have some very interesting ideas. We are open to more ideas.
Yes.
And as you're going to be watching this on YouTube or other places, please do hit subscribe because we would love to
figure out if people are interested.
And we do know that this podcast is called Big Talk because we want to give people value. Yes. And we're not here because we're trying to become
just
famous.
Pass the time. And I promise you that if we have a guest who says something that I don't agree with, I will push back, and we're gonna try to squeeze every drop of value out of these talks.
And that we're gonna be doing this for you. So we hope you have a great week. Thank you for listening, and we are open to feedback.